What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If. If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my third channel, so if you want some more what ifs, go check out my other channels. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. Sasuke sighed as he looked at his teammates as they sat together. He could still hardly believe they'd just come face to face with an S-ranked criminal. An enemy in the same league as him. It was a reminder of just how far he still had to go, but that wasn't the concern at the moment. Sasuke's teammates did not look well now that the adrenaline had worn off. It was clear how rough a time they'd had while he'd been out cold. Sakura's eyelids were drooping at times, one of her eyes would be half closed, and she was still shaky on her feet. Naruto was better off, but even then there was a weariness about him, far from the norm for the exuberant blonde. I hate to say it, but I think we should take the day off from the test, Sasuke told them, drawing shock from his teammates. What? But Sasuke, we only have 4 days left, and we don't even know how many heaven scrolls are still out there, Sakura replied, now sitting up on full alert. Sakura, you had to keep watch. While I was out, you've been up for over 24 hours. Now, and you haven't fully recovered from that sound attack. You think you're in the best condition to fight, Sasuke pointed out. He then turned to Naruto, and Naruto had to camp out by himself with all the predators and enemies out there. He would have had to sleep with one eye open. Yeah, Naruto added with a grimace, rubbing the back of his head. He has a point. Also, have either of you eaten since breakfast yesterday? I know I haven't. As if on cue, a rumble rang out from Sakura's stomach. The pink-haired girl put a hand to her belly and blushed. Sasuke shook his head. Yeah, that's what I thought, so we rest and recuperate for today, then pick things up tomorrow with Naruto's shadow clones. It shouldn't be too hard to find another team, at least now that Orochimaru's not around to destroy them. Guess we have no choice. Sakura slumped slightly, and with that admission her eyes fell half shut. It seemed like she wasn't trying to fight her exhaustion anymore. Alright, I'll have my clones scout out a place to hang out heads today, Naruto said, putting a fist to his chest. We cook whatever we catch here, then head out. Sasuke nodded. Hopefully we can get it done before someone or something follows the smoke. He then stood up. I'll get us something to eat. Out of the three of us, I'm in the best condition. My clones will bring back any berries or whatever that they find, Naruto added. I've been studying local flora. I should be able to tell if any of it's poisonous. Sakura threw in. Naruto pointed off into the forest. There's a stream about 40 yards that way if you think you can round up some fish. Sasuke nodded. Naruto's clones were extremely useful. Alright, I'll be back in half an hour, he said before he walked off, then leaped into the trees in a burst of speed. It didn't take long before he found the stream Naruto had mentioned. Standing at its shifting waters, he brought a hand to the mark on the nape of his neck and grimaced. The pain had mostly subsided. All that remained was a dull throbbing. He remembered what Naruto said. This thing was probably supposed to get him addicted to its power. He suddenly had a bad feeling about something. He called upon the Sharingan, but as his eyes bled crimson, the dull ache became a burning, stabbing pain that shot through his whole body. He let out a strangled cry as he doubled over, gripping the mark with both hands. Great, this thing was going to try to force Sasuke to use it. That's just great. He stood there for a few moments, taking in heavy breaths as he waited for the pain to subside. When it was over, he took on a taijutsu stance and ran through a kata. Taijutsu didn't set it off. He'd thought as much, given how he was able to make it here in the first place, though even that might trigger it if he did anything too intensive. Still, he had taijutsu as skill, and the seals Naruto gave him didn't use much chakra, so those should be fine, so he wasn't completely helpless. Still, he'd have to tell the others when he got back. They deserved to know, and he didn't want this to come out when they were in the middle of a fight. Half an hour later, Sasuke came back with 8 fish caught with a makeshift spear he'd made. Naruto started a fire while he set about making brine to salt the meat. Sakura meanwhile separated what the clones had brought back. Quite a few plants and mushrooms got tossed away. The pink-haired girl saying they'd either give them stomach problems or kill them soon enough. Their food was roasting as they sat around a fire. Naruto's clones had a perimeter so they should be alerted to anything that came their way. All three of them eyed the cooking with anticipation as they waited. Sasuke sighed. Well, I guess now's as good a time as any, the Uchiha said, drawing his teammates' attention. He pointed at the seal on his neck. This thing won't let me use jutsu. Anytime I try to use too much chakra, it tries to make me use it. What? Naruto exclaimed. Wait, then Sakura began. I'm not helpless, he cut them off. I can still use taijutsu and Naruto's seals. Well, that was a relief. Still, this just got worse and worse. It pissed Naruto off that the bastard had waltzed in their village and as good as branded his friend, and then he left without so much as a by your leave. And what he did to those genin from his own village. Orochimaru saw people as nothing but pawns that he could throw away or do whatever he wanted with whenever he wanted. It made him sick. They both calmed down. Naruto grimaced and crossed his arms. We need to get to the proctors. Maybe we can get them or Kakashi-sensei to do something about it before the next test. I mean, they're going to have to talk to us anyway since we ran into Orochimaru. Sasuke and Sakura nodded. They should. I mean, that's not exactly part of the exams. The pink-haired Kunoichi said. How are you holding up? Sakura. Naruto asked. I'm fine, I'm getting better. I think I can stand up straight without a problem now, just tired and hungry. Sakura replied. I didn't do much aside from watching Sasuke all night. She then looked at him curiously. What about you? Same, I didn't really run into any trouble. Naruto shrugged and then he smiled. I did meet this girl though. Sakura raised a brow. A girl? He nodded. Yeah, this green-haired girl from Taki named Fu. Orochimaru had some other snakes waiting for me and she jumped in to help. She said she wanted to be friends and then we went our separate ways. I'd suspect that was a trap, but it doesn't look like this girl tried to follow you, Sasuke observed. We said we'd meet up at the tower. I hope so. Fu seemed like a lot of fun. He then chuckled. She rode on one of the snakes like it was a bull trying to throw her off. Sakura looked at him dully. Seriously, why am I reminded of a certain someone right now? Naruto just laughed and rubbed the back of his head. A day later, and the three genin of Team 7 were well rested with full bellies. Sakura had mostly recovered from her fight with the Oto genin, and Sasuke was as good as he would get until they got someone to look at that seal. It was time to get a move on and hopefully finish this test so they could get out of this forest. As they leaped through the trees moving towards the tower, Sakura turned to Naruto. Have your clones found anyone yet? Naruto shook his head. Doesn't look like it. We should keep heading toward the tower, Sasuke said. If we're lucky, we'll find a team along the way. If not, we can set up an ambush that's sure to net us both. Scrolls sounds good. They were interrupted by a roar coming from the forest floor. All three turned to look in that direction, but Sasuke was the first to move with Naruto following close behind. It sounded like something big had cornered something. They moved down the tree until they were running along the trunk and they spied it. It was a giant bear and it had cornered a red-headed girl with a kusa forehead protector by some tree trunk. She wore a mesh shirt and stockings, a purple skirt, a light brown short-sleeved jacket with an orange stripe going across the chest, and black sandals. She'd fallen prone on her stomach helpless. Sasuke was the closest and so he launched himself at the beast, proving he was in fact far from helpless. He flipped through the air and brought his leg down on the bear's head in a move Naruto recognized from their spars. Lion's barrage. He flipped 2 more times, slamming his foot into the beast's head twice more. The third hit knocked the oversized bear out cold and it fell flat on the ground. Sasuke stood triumphantly on its head looking down at the girl who stared up at him. On Earth scroll like ours, huh? Sasuke asked. Naruto wasn't sure he approved of him thinking of the test right now, but hey, he did save the girl's life. Besides, they really needed to get out of the forest and talk to the old man. He and Sakura jumped down and landed by the Uchiha's side. Is she alright? Naruto asked. The girl jolted at his voice and quickly scrambled for oh, she had glasses. She looks like it. I don't see any cuts or scratches. Sakura noted. We're in a hurry. If the girl's okay, then let's. Sasuke began, only for the girl to cut him off. Wait, the girl cried out. All three of them looked to her to see she was scrambling to her feet, looking at them desperately. Please wait, is something wrong? Naruto asked, a bit worried about the expression on her face. She looked like she was terrified of something. You're Naruto Uzumaki, right? Naruto blinked and raised a brow. Yeah, why? I'm Karen Uzumaki. Please, you have to help me, she cried, distress clear In her voice what both of his teammates froze as they all looked down at the girl with wide-eyed shock. His mind reeled as he realized who she was, that this girl could be part of his long-lost family. Karen looked up from her place on the ground and still couldn't believe it. There beside the boy who saved her was Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who'd so brazenly announced himself to all the genin, who had blown away all the fears of the genin. At the end of the first test, her distant cousin, part of her had wanted to reach out to him then and there, but she'd known there was no hope there. Her teammates would never have let her say anything, if they even let them talk at all. After so many years in Kusa, she had all but given up and accepted her lot in life, but now there was a spark where there had only been emptiness before, brought about by the kindness Karen had received from the black-haired boy, the first act of kindness she'd received since she set foot in Kusa, and by the presence of her cousin. She didn't know him yet, but she was practically begging fate that their relation would mean something. This was the first time she'd felt any sense of hope in years. She hadn't felt any since the day she'd seen her mother lying on a hospital bed covered by a white sheet. Naruto was the first to recover and leaped down, standing in front of her. Really, you're from my clan? She nodded. Please help me with what's wrong? Can't your team? He started, but she shook her head violently. No, they can't. They're part of the problem, she yelled. She then became timid, afraid of rejection, fearful that this last tether of hope would be severed. Please hear me out. Naruto frowned and crossed his arms. He briefly glanced around before looking like he was thinking hard. Right, they were in the middle of a life or death exam. This probably looked kinda sketchy. She knew her teammates wouldn't have gotten cornered that easily. Please. After a moment he nodded. All right, let's hear it. Her heart soared. Maybe this nightmare would end. Can we move? I don't want my team to find us. Sounds like a good idea to me, the blonde replied with a shrug. Are you sure about this? The pink-haired girl asked skeptically. This could be a trap. If it is, we'll deal with it, Naruto replied firmly. Let's see what she has to say. Let's go. Sakura, the coal-eyed boy, said. He's made up his mind. You know as well as I do that once he's decided on something, there's no talking him out of it. Sakura nodded to him and turned to Karen. What direction did your team go? And she pointed in the opposite direction of the tower. Good, we were heading the other way anyway. Still, let's veer off a bit just in case. They traveled in silence for 10 minutes, Naruto taking point Sasuke to one side while Sakura was behind her, while she was in the center, probably in case she tried anything. Not that she would. Hell, she couldn't even if she wanted to. There was a reason her teammates had left her behind. Thoughts flew through Karen's mind as she looked to the two boys, the one who had saved her life and her cousin who she hoped would do so a second time. She remembered everything that had happened to her in Kusa and looked to her cousin, praying that he would help her. Finally the black-haired boy pointed down. The other genin nodded. They were soon standing within the roots of one of the giant trees of the forest. Okay, what's the trouble, Karen? Naruto asked, and Karen was struck, not for the first time. As she looked at him, she could sense chakra. It wasn't too uncommon from what her mother said, but in some members of their clan a powerful version of the ability manifested. It wasn't just the range that was impressive, but the accuracy. At least it would be once she honed it more. Right now, one unique power of hers was the limited ability to read the hearts of those in close range. Chakra felt warm. The more kind a person was, and colder the crueler or more evil they were. Naruto's chakra was so warm. How much do you know about our clan? Karen asked. Naruto seemed confused by the question, but he answered, not much. He then looked a bit sad. I'm an orphan and no one ever talked to me about it. Honestly, I only recently found out we were a clan. Karen was surprised from what her mother had told her about their relationship to Konoha. She thought he'd know a lot more, but something else stood out to her. So you're alone too? Not anymore, Naruto replied. I've got my team and some other people close to me, but what about you? Karen looked away for a moment, taking a breath as she gathered her thoughts, steeled herself from the emotions she knew would follow, and prepared to explain everything. Well, our clan has 5 abilities my mother explained to me before she passed. Aside from our vitality and our sealing techniques, there's the power to create chakra chains, a rare sensory skill that I inherited, and one other ability that I have. Naruto seemed to sense that this was difficult for her and looked concerned. What is it? We can use our vitality to heal others by having them bite us, our vitality is channeled into them. Through the bite it can heal fatal wounds in moments. Naruto's eyebrows shot up and his teammates seemed just as surprised. My mother and we originally lived in a small farming that got attacked. She brought us to Kusa and offered to use that ability to heal their people if they let us live there. She choked up a bit. They drained my mother day in and day out until they sucked her dry. And then she closed her eyes and looked away as she reached to her collar and pulled it down. She heard 2 gasps ring out as they saw the close to a dozen bite marks there alone. The only reason they even brought me here was so my team could use me to keep up their strength. When she opened her eyes, her vision a bit blurry. Naruto was staring in shock. Sakura looked horrified while the black-haired boy had moved past that and looked cold and angry. Please, I know they'll kill me too. If I go back you have to get me out of Kusa now. Anger began to filter into Phil Naruto's face, his hands clenched at his side as his face twisted, teeth grit in rage. Then the expression dropped. He stepped forward, placing his hands on her shoulders before pulling her into a hug. Don't worry, I'm not letting you go back there. I don't care what I have to do, I will help you. She teared up and wrapped her arms around him as she sobbed into his shoulder. Once Karen calmed down, she was left sitting against the roots while Team 7 stood together discussing what they'd just heard. Naruto, I understand that you want to help her, especially if she's actually your cousin, but what do you think we can do for her? Sakura asked before glancing back at Karen. Don't get me wrong, if that story's true then I want to help her too, but what are 3 genin going to do? Help her go rogue ninja? But it's not just 3 genin, Naruto pointed out with a smile. Come on, give me some credit. I have thought this through kinda. It's not like I walked up to her without a backup plan in mind, Naruto said, glancing up at a bird silently gazing down at them as it groomed itself. We need to talk to old man Hokage. If anyone can help her it's him, and he's probably already going to talk to us thanks to Orochimaru. We just have to get to the tower soon enough for him to get to us, and we were already going to do that so someone could take a look at that seal on Sasuke. Knowing Lord Third, he'd definitely want to do something about this. Sasuke assessed with a nod, crossing his arms, and he's right, they'll probably want to know about what happened. If not the Hokage, then some other higher up, and we can pass what we know about Karen up to them. He then looked to Naruto. But what if he won't or can't help? Naruto grimaced and rubbed the back of his head. I'll cross that bridge if we come to it. Sasuke sighed. Try not to make promises you can't keep. He then shrugged. Anyway, it's worth a shot. Sakura nodded in agreement, and Naruto smiled. Thanks you guys. The trio rejoined Karen, who looked to them with hope. Okay, the first thing we need to do is get to the tower, but we're still one scroll short. The redhead nodded. What do you want me to do? Naruto shrugged. Well, if there's anything you can do to help, we'd appreciate it. Karen seemed to shrink away. I can't do much. I can sense chakra, but I'm not really good at pinpointing locations right now. We can handle that. In the meantime, use the transformation jutsu in case your team comes looking for you, Sakura told her, only for Karen to flinch. I can't. What do you mean you can't? Naruto asked, raising a brow. Even he could pull that technique off back when he was at the academy. Hell, his original jutsu had been based on it. I don't know how. Sakura grimaced before face palming. Oh boy, I see. They as good as killed your mother and used you as a walking elixir. Of course they wouldn't teach you enough to run away. She then looked at her dully. Let me guess, they only taught you enough to keep up with them so you wouldn't slow them down, didn't they? Karen flinched again, curling into herself a bit. Did they even teach you how to fight? Not really. Sasuke sighed. I wondered how you got cornered by that bear so easily. Bastards, Naruto cursed under his breath. And they sent her to these exams with so little training. He'd wonder if they were trying to get her killed, but after the whole walking elixir thing, this shouldn't be a surprise. Alright, we can take care of that. You just stay out of sight when we find a team. Okay, Karen nodded. They resumed moving toward the tower with one extra among them. Naruto glanced back at Karen, who still seemed troubled. After telling them her story, he wanted to talk to her, to give her comforting words, or just speak with the first blood relative he'd ever met. But what was he supposed to say after that? He couldn't think of anything that wasn't either lame or wouldn't go back to that story. Instead, they simply traveled in silence. It was a bit over half an hour later that a rush of memories flowed into Naruto's mind. There was a trio of genin traveling towards the tower, keeping low to the ground, and they weren't too far from where they were right now. He didn't know which of them had their scroll, but if they were heading in their direction, then there was a good chance they either had both scrolls or had the same idea. They did. Even then there was a 50-50 shot they had what they need. This could be it. He held up his hand, gesturing for the rest of his team to stop. They landed on a branch and looked around, spotting a tree with a hollow space near the bottom. He turned to his apparent cousin and pointed to the empty space. "Hey Karen, we're going to go hunting for a scroll hideout down there." "Okay." Karen nodded. "Okay." They watched as she jumped down to the forest floor. "Found someone?" Sasuke asked. Naruto gestured to the right with his head. "Yeah, there's a group heading towards the tower. If we move now we can set up an ambush." His teammates nodded, and they headed out. 3 genin from AIM traveled as blurs across the forest floor. All 3 wore blue outfits with cloaks and had large umbrellas on their backs. Wherever they were going, they seemed to be trying to keep quiet, darting beneath the trees wherever possible. Shame they'd already been spotted. As they emerged from the shadow of a root system, a blinding light erupted ahead of them. The 3 came to a stop, crying out in pain and shielding their faces as the light burned their eyes. "Crap, ambush!" one of them called out before he suddenly let out a cry of shock. "Sakura must have done her part." "Daiki," one of the others called out, and now it was his turn. He made a hand sign and inhaled deeply, needing the air in his lungs. Wind style air bullets. A volley of balls of air flew from his mouth towards the 2 AIM genin. They dodged as the light disappeared, revealing their friend had been buried up to his neck in the ground. The pair leaped backward, only for a few stones behind one of the genin to burst into smoke, revealing 2 of Naruto's clones. They shot towards the nearest genin. While he was still in midair, he twisted his body in an attempt to dodge the impending attack, but wasn't nearly fast enough. One of the clones drove his fist into one of his kidneys. The other slipped beneath him and struck him in the jaw with a kick. One last air bullet from the real Naruto slammed into his chest, driving him into the tree behind them. The remaining genin grit his teeth. "Damn it!" Sakura burst from the ground, forming a hand seal. Earth style Earth flow spears. The final genin jumped into the air as a trail of stone spears moved ever closer towards him. "Right where they wanted him," he gasped out as a trio of shuriken flew out from behind him, flying past him before changing course. Wires glinting in the light, they wrapped around him and tightened, pulling him towards a nearby tree and binding him there. As they dug into his skin, Naruto looked around and saw no sign that they were getting up. "Looks like we got them," Sakura called out. Naruto grinned as he jumped down. "Good work, guys. Now let's see if they got what we need." Sakura gestured to the buried genin as Sasuke stepped out from his hiding place. "Well, it's not on him. They ultimately found what they were looking for on Sasuke's target." Naruto let out a whoop as he held up the beige scroll they'd been hoping to see. "Great, now we can get out of this forest," Sakura said, putting her hands together. He didn't blame her. Between Orochimaru, that seal, and their much-needed talk with their leader, he was eager to get out of here too. Naruto turned to the bound genin. "No hard feelings, right, guys? We didn't make the rules here." The genin seemed to know he was beaten and turned away. "Just take it and go." It looked like things were finally going their way again. After they got the scroll, the 3 had left the 3 AIM genin where they caught them and returned to Karen's hidey hole, where they found her curled up against one of the roots. With the redhead in tow, the trio made their way to the tower. It took a few hours, but they made it without any more complications. Karen stood at the entrance as the 3 genin of Team 7 stepped inside one of the rooms and looked around. "There's no one here," Naruto said. Sakura noticed something and pointed to above them. "Hey, look up there." The genin looked up to see a poster on the far wall. After reading it for a moment, she turned to her teammates. "I think it's telling us to open the scrolls." The 3 exchanged looks and nodded. Naruto pulled out the 2 scrolls and handed one to Sakura. They looked at them with trepidation, unsure of what was unfold. After a moment they unfurled them at the same time. They never had a chance to read what was written on them because the moment they'd been opened up, smoke began to rise from them. "It's a summoning jutsu." "Get back," Sasuke said, and Naruto and Sakura immediately dropped the scrolls and leaped backward. A figure appeared within the smoke, and the 3 genin tensed while Karen partly hid behind The doorframe slowly, the smoke cleared to reveal Naruto's eyes widened before he smiled widely. Iruka-sensei, the scarred Chunin, smiled. Hey Naruto, good to see you. He gave the three genin an appraising look. Looks like you had a rough time of it, but I'm glad you got here in good time. You don't know the half of it, Iruka-sensei, Naruto began before his eyes widened. He'd been so surprised to see Iruka that other things had slipped from his mind for a second. He looked at his former teacher urgently, and the man frowned as he picked up on it. Listen, you need to call Lord Hokage. Orochimaru is in the forest. What, Orochimaru? Iruka exclaimed, taking a step back. It was probably a mark of how serious he was that he had referred to him as Lord Hokage instead of old man or something. Naruto nodded. He attacked us on the first day. He put some weird seal on Sasuke's neck, Sakura added. Iruka looked between them, then to Sasuke, who nodded. Placing a hand over the mark, Iruka closed his eyes and calmed himself. I see. I'll tell Lord Third immediately. He'll probably want to talk to you and look at that seal. Can he do something about it? Sasuke asked. Using too much chakra seems to trigger it. Iruka nodded. If it's what I think it is, I believe so. I'm glad you're alright. And it was then he noticed Karen, who was still partly hiding behind the door. The redhead hesitated for a moment before stepping into the room. And who's this, a ninja from Kusa? She's not a part of that, Naruto explained with a shake of his head. That's a whole other situation that I wanted to talk to the old man about. He looked at the Chunin pleadingly. Just trust me, Iruka-sensei, she's in big trouble. Iruka held his gaze for a moment before looking back at the girl. After a moment he nodded. I'm not so sure about this, but I guess there's no harm in bringing it up with Lord Hokage if he's coming here anyway. He then turned and walked to the door. Come with me. And with that, Iruka led them through the tower. Karen joined Team 7 behind the scarred Chunin, looking more than a little concerned. Who's Orochimaru, and why did that have him so worried? Naruto frowned. Orochimaru's an S-ranked criminal who came from our village, so him suddenly showing up here is a pretty big deal, he explained. Karen looked at him in confusion. S-ranked, she questioned, and then shrugged. Well, if he's a criminal from Konoha, I guess I understand. Sakura sighed. They didn't tell you anything, did they? She trailed off into a series of grumbles before putting her hands on her hips. S-rank basically means the shinobi is so powerful that fighting them is usually certain death, even for standard jonin in large numbers. Karen's eyes widened. And you fought him and got our asses kicked, Naruto replied. So who is this girl anyway? Iruka asked, half turning to look at Naruto. Her name's Karen. It's a long story. Like I said, I'm hoping the old man can help her out, Naruto replied, glancing at the girl. And why do you think we can help her if her village can't? Iruka questioned with a raised brow. Naruto scowled. Because her village is the problem, the scarred Chunin frowned at him, clearly not understanding, but in the end he shrugged and closed his eyes. Well, I'll trust you on this one. Lord Hokage will sort it out one way or another. Iruka stopped at a pair of double doors and opened it for them. It was a large room with a table, a couch, and a desk against the far wall. All right, stay here until Lord Hokage arrives. And with that he vanished in a burst of speed. So I guess there's nothing else to do but sit tight until the old man gets here, Naruto said before turning to Karen. So you mentioned you lived in a farming village. What kind of things did you like to do there? Well, I used to like reading the books. My mother got me the 4 genin. We're alone in the room for a few hours. During that time Naruto got to know his cousin Sakura. Had been happy to find that Karen was as much of a bookworm as she was, though she hadn't had much to read in the last few years, or anything to be happy about really. Apparently she'd had to report to the hospital first thing in the morning in Kusa and spent the whole day there. He was really starting to hate Kusa. There hadn't been much else typical farming village stuff, though Karen had liked to go exploring in the forest. They didn't pry much farther. They hadn't wanted to bring up the village's fate or her time in Kusa. Eventually there came a knocking on the door. The 4 turned to it as it was opened by an ANBU member who stood aside to allow a familiar figure to enter. Naruto couldn't help but return the smile the old man gave them. Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, I'm glad to see you well after your harrowing experience. Hey old man Hokage. Naruto blinked as he registered that he wasn't the only familiar person who entered the room. Kakashi-sensei, they called you here too. Is it any surprise where my team is concerned? The silver-haired jonin asked. Well, Glad to see you weren't late this time, and Naruto trailed off as a man he didn't recognize entered along with two more ANBU. He had long ash blonde hair reaching into his lower back, which he wore spiky on top and ending in a long ponytail, and light green eyes. He wore the standard flak jacket over a black outfit with handguards, a forehead protector, and a sleeveless red Haori Inoichi, Sakura said, stepping forward seeming confused by the man's presence. Sakura, long time no see, the man Inoichi greeted with a nod. So Sakura knew him and that name, and while it was a different shade of blonde, Sakura turned to him and Sasuke and confirmed what he was suspecting. This is Ino's dad, Inoichi Yamanaka. I called him here to help with the less urgent concern, the man known as the third god of shinobi said before turning his eyes to Karen, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. As I'm sure you can imagine, I was rather surprised to hear that you came here with a foreign shinobi in tow, claiming she was in some kind of danger, he said as he stepped forward with his hands behind his back. He gave her an appraising eye. I believe I have a suspicion as to this girl's identity, but can you confirm it for me? Naruto nodded and gestured towards the redhead. This is Karen Uzumaki. Kakashi's eye widened while Hiruzen nodded, looking at Naruto harder than he remembered in a long time. I see. I hope you didn't bring her here to plead her case just because she's your apparent cousin. Naruto began to quickly wave his hands back and forward in front of him, looking vaguely panicked. No, of course not. I mean, that's not all. I wouldn't have brought her here if I didn't think she needed serious help. He turned to Karen, who seemed even more uncertain. Tell them, Karen. Karen nodded and stepped forward. Lord Hokage. Yes, young lady, I trust there's a good reason my genin have brought you to me. Yes, I begged them for help. Karen began, and then explained her story. Hearing it still made Naruto's hackles raise, but he took a moment to look at the other occupants. He didn't glance at the ANBU. He knew he wouldn't see anything from them. Kakashi took it all and seemingly as stoic as ever, but his gaze was as sharp as it was during his battle with Zabuza. Inoichi was scowling, the other blonde's hands clenched when Karen revealed the bite marks on her neck. As for old man Hokage, he stoically took it all and his gaze still as hard as before, but Naruto suspected it was for a different reason. Now when Karen's story ended, he sighed. Unfortunately, Kusa's distaste for outsiders is well known. It has brought them no end to conflicts in the past. This is about what I'd expect from them. You believe she's telling the truth? One of the ANBU asked. I believe her story is plausible. I know that the ability she described is indeed a rare Uzumaki trait, the third replied before he stepped to the side and looked at Inoichi. I suspected your abilities would be useful here when I heard of the girl. If you would, Inoichi, confirm her tale to the best of your abilities. As you wish. It shouldn't be hard with a genin, Inoichi said as he stepped forward. Karen seemed uneasy as he approached. Just relax and stay still. I'm not going to hurt you, he said gently. Karen nodded. After a moment, Inoichi placed a hand on her head and closed his eyes. Karen jerked a second later, then seemed to relax to allow Inoichi to do whatever it was he was doing. What's he doing? Naruto asked. He's reading her mind, Kakashi-sensei said as he took a spot beside his genin. It's a rare skill, but of course the Yamanaka clan excels at arts related to the mind and spirit. He's likely the most proficient with this ability in all of Konoha. Whoa, Naruto uttered in awe. He hadn't known that was possible. When Inoichi took his hand away, he looked disgusted. He turned to their leader with a glare. Unless someone altered her memory, she's telling the truth, the whole thing, he said before he cursed and stepped away from her. I see, Hiruzen said, and he looked at the girl more softly than he had before. I'm sorry about your mother and that you had to endure such treatment. Thank you, Karen replied, looking up at the elder shinobi more hopefully. Will you help me? The third nodded. I believe it would not be out of the question to offer you asylum, he said before he cupped his chin, although I imagine Kusa will raise a fuss and it will reflect poorly on Konoha to seemingly poach another village's talent. We'll need to come up with something. I don't believe that will be a problem. Lord Hokage, Inoichi spoke up, frowning deeply. They barely trained this girl. She spent pretty much all her time in the hospital being used to treat any injured shinobi. I wouldn't be surprised if your grandson could outfight her. She wouldn't stand a chance against the forest's hazards alone. You don't know the half of it. Naruto cut in, furious as he recalled how they met his cousin. She was about to get killed by a bear. When we found her, we only got to her because we decided to look into what was going on when he heard the thing roar. Then they have every reason to assume her dead, and thus aren't likely to complain unless she makes a name for herself. Hiruzen mused before nodded. Very well, you may find shelter here in Konoha. Karen's face lit up. It was the first time since meeting her Naruto had seen her happy. She bowed deeply. Thank you, Lord Hokage. She then turned to him. Before he could say anything, she ran over and threw her arms around him. And thank you for listening, he returned the embrace. Don't mention it, Karen. I wasn't about to leave you to die like that. For a moment no one said anything before Lord Hokage coughed. While I would like nothing more than to leave you to get to know one another, there are procedures to follow in these circumstances. He looked at Karen. You will be going with Inoichi. Rest assured we will not demand that you use your power for us, though we would welcome whenever you chose to use it to help another. Karen nodded as Inoichi stepped forward. Sorry, but it's best we get started as soon as possible. Karen looked as disappointed as he did, but gave in. She walked over to the blonde man before giving them one last look. Thank you again for saving me. She then looked at Sasuke twice. It's nothing. None of us would stand aside and watch someone die like that. I just got there first, Sasuke said with a small smile, and she blushed. Oh great, well at least she had more of a reason to have a crush on him than Sakura Ino and all his fangirls back in the academy did. He did save her life. He watched as the now ex-Kusa Kunoichi left with Inoichi, one of the ANBU, trailing behind them as they disappeared behind the closing doors. His gaze lingered there for a few seconds. I once told you all that shinobi who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. Kakashi spoke up, drawing his attention. He too was staring at the door before he looked at his students. That I have no words for what's going to happen to her, Naruto asked. Well, as I said, there are protocols to follow. Besides, as unlikely as it is possible that the girl's memories have been altered, the third Hokage stated as he looked down at Naruto. She'll be kept in isolation in these circumstances. She'll be treated well, but effectively under house arrest. During this time we will do all we can to examine her for any signs that she may be a spy or a threat to the village. We'll also give her a DNA test to confirm she is a member of the Uzamaki clan. If all checks out and we find no cause for concern, she'll be inducted into the village in a month or so. Naruto was silent for a moment, smiling at the thought of getting to know a relative, of having a family. No, that wasn't right. Team 7, the third Hokage Iruka, Tochi and Ayam were his family. He wasn't gaining one, he was adding to it. The third Hokage smiled down at him for a moment, letting him bask in that thought before his expression hardened a bit. Although I hope you didn't take her story at face value, especially in these circumstances. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Well, I wanted to believe her, he replied, but it's not like I walked into it totally defenseless. I had some shadow clones disguised as birds following us. Before we even met her, they would have jumped in if she tried anything. The third nodded. Well, it's good that you had a backup plan. He then looked at the three genin seriously, looking like the strong leader he was. Now on to the issue that brought me here. Describe your encounter with my wayward student. And so they did, and when the three genin finished relaying the tale, the third had moved them to one of the rooms meant for the genin. He now stood over Sasuke and examined the seal while the Uchiha sat on one of the beds. Kakashi had been dismissed, being assured that the third would personally handle it. Definitely one of his curse marks. I see. Curse mark, it's a type of cursed seal. Orochimaru invented. Hiruzen explained. Cursed seals are different from traditional sealing jutsu. They are meant to control people, usually by manipulating thoughts or paralyzing or even killing the bearer on command, or if they break some taboo established by the seal's creator. Orochimaru's seal, however, is insidious. It grants one power but corrupts their mentality the more they use it, gradually making them more like him. Ultimately they join him willingly, granting him a powerful and loyal servant. Naruto clenched his fists in anger while Sakura looked concerned, her hands clasping together before her chest. The third continued. Fortunately, it will go dormant if it goes unused for long enough, and it can be sealed. He then looked from one genin to the other. I should warn you, Orochimaru's subordinate Dosu was right. Orochimaru has threatened to destroy Konoha if the exams are interrupted. That got exclaims of shock from Naruto and Sakura, and a widening of the eyes from Sasuke. For that reason we will continue with the exams. We'll prepare for the worst while hoping That Sasuke was his only objective in coming here. How do you know so much about the cursed mark, Gramps? Naruto asked after a pause. There is a shinobi in Konoha who was marked with this same seal before Orochimaru left the village. I'll say no more, it is not my story to tell, Hiruzen said before turning to the Uchiha heir Sasuke. I'm going to restrain the cursed mark. It will not be easy on you, though it won't be as strenuous as having it placed on you in the first place, even so you can expect to be out the rest of the day. Are you prepared? Sasuke nodded and braced himself. The third nodded very well. He brought his hand to his mouth and bit into his thumb, drawing blood, and then placed it on the nape of Sasuke's neck just below the cursed mark, four corners restraining seal. And then Sasuke cried out in pain as the blood flowed up his skin and formed a circle around the cursed mark, 4 points in what was meant to represent the cardinal directions. When it was over, Sasuke slumped forward. Sasuke! Sakura cried as she and Naruto ran forward to catch him, finding he had already lost consciousness. Sasuke will be fine, Hiruzen said as he put his hands behind his back. Team 10 will be informed that they are not to speak a word of Orochimaru's involvement in the exam should they arrive. For now you are free to roam the tower as is Sasuke once he wakes up. The third walked to the door as Sakura laid Sasuke down. Take the remaining time to relax and unwind. I hope the rest of your trials here will be more conventional. After taking the time to use their room's bathroom to clean up a bit, Naruto took to exploring the tower as Sakura stayed in their room and watched over Sasuke. He found there wasn't much to see. There was a cafeteria, but aside from that it looked like it was all meeting rooms and bedrooms. Geez, I might just go back to the room and practice my sealing jutsu, Naruto thought to himself as he put his hands in his pockets. As he looked out a nearby window, he was high enough to be above even the massive trees of the forest. He briefly wondered what kind of creatures wandered the place, but it wasn't like he could see anything from here. He shrugged and kept walking. It was then that he heard footsteps approaching from around the nearby corner. Man, I am so bored. Isn't there anything to do here? A familiar voice groaned. Naruto smiled as he recognized it a second later. For rounded the corner, slumped forward, and looking more than a little down, she blinked when she saw him before her. Face lit up. Naruto, you made it. He waved at her. Hey Fu, good to see you. The green-haired girl crossed the distance between them in a single bound, laughing as she took a spot in front of him, her face inches from his. I'm so glad you're here. Maybe now we can have some fun. Naruto scratched his cheek. Geez, you act you've been cooped up here by yourself. Don't you have your team with you? Fu deflated at that and slumped forward again. She looked away and rubbed the back of her head. Yeah, but we're not exactly friends. Our team was kinda put together at the last minute for the exams. I asked if they wanted to hang out, but they both wanted to do their own thing, she began, and everyone else I met here is so caught up in the exams that they don't want to be around someone from another village. So she pretty much had been on her own then. Naruto gave her a grin and put his hands behind his head. Well, I'm game. What have you got in mind? Fu brightened up again. How about we play cards or backgammon? Naruto raised a brow at her. Did you bring cards or a backgammon table? Because I sure didn't. Damn it, Fu cursed under her breath. Then how about we take a bath together? Naruto's face went red. That's not something you do with someone you just met, or if they're a boy and you're a girl. Really? I know I've heard that friends do stuff like that, Fu replied with a frown, crossing her arms and looking like she was thinking hard. Naruto got the feeling that Fu didn't have many friends if she thought that was normal. Trust me, it isn't. Fu seemed to fall into depression. Then what are we going to do? Wander the halls together? Naruto cupped his chin and thought she was right. This place was boring and they had 2 whole days left to kill. He racked his brain for ways to pass the time before the favorite hobby of a particularly lazy member of the Nara clan entered his mind. We could go cloud watching. I do plenty of that back in Taki. It's not really fun, Fu replied with a shake of her head. Naruto thought for a moment before an idea sparked in his mind. Then let's make a competition out of it. Fu tilted her head to the side. Whoever spots the coolest shapes wins, Naruto said, raising a fist in challenge. Fu didn't look impressed. She sighed as she shrugged her shoulders and put her hands on her hips. I don't know, we're still just watching clouds go by. Look at that one, Fu exclaimed as she sat up, pointing at the sky. It looks like a flock of birds taking off. Oh yeah, I see it, Naruto said as he looked where she was. She was right. It really did look like three birds in formation, their wings raised mid-flap. Fu fell onto her back and closed her eyes, smiling with confidence as she laid on the tower's roof. Haha, try and top that. Naruto got her attention by poking her in the shoulder. When she looked at him, he gave her a cheeky grin and pointed. She followed his finger and sat up, her eyes bugging out. He was pointing at a cloud that looked like a dragon in the middle of a rampage, the bipedal kind, its head and torso poking out from behind a building it could knock down at any moment. He made a victory sign. Looks like I win again, Fu growled, burying her hands in her mint green hair before turning to Naruto. Just you wait, the next round's mine. She then smiled and giggled. You know, this is actually a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm surprised too. He then raised himself up, propping one arm on his knee and looked at her with a smile. Hey, how about I show you around the village? Once we're out of this tower, I'll show you all the sights and the best restaurant in Konoha. Fu's face lit up with excitement. She made a joyous exclamation as she turned to face him, fully leaning towards him and placing both hands on the roof. I'd love that. I can't wait. Time skip. Now let's see, Naruto said as he looked over the spread in the cafeteria. It had been about a day since they'd arrived in the tower, which meant it was about time for Sasuke to wake up. Sakura wouldn't leave the room until he opened his eyes, so it was up to Naruto to bring back some grub for her and Sasuke too. Sadly, there was no ramen. It was almost a crime to have this much food and leave that out, but beggars couldn't be choosers, and what they had out was still good. Now what to get this time? Well, look what we have here. Naruto turned to see Kiba walking towards him with his hands in his pockets, his little dog resting on his head as usual. Surprised you made it then again. I guess you guys have Sasuke to carry you, huh? Oh hey Kiba, I didn't know there was a pound around here, Naruto replied, giving the brown-haired boy a look of mock surprise. Well, good thing they managed to take one mud of the streets. Kiba's eye twitched. He glared at Naruto and growled like the dog he resembled. What was that? He then scoffed. Whatever, I don't know why I let you get to me. Not like the dead last is going to make it through the next round. You're pretty much a free ride for whoever's lucky enough to wind up against you. Naruto grit his teeth, raising a fist. Think so, huh? Then get ready to get blown away, because I'll be taking names until I get to the top. Keep dreaming, Kiba scoffed. He then looked over the three containers Naruto was preparing and raised a brow. So what's with all the food? Your team got you running errands for them. Sasuke was hurt pretty bad back in the forest, though he should be up soon, Naruto answered. It wasn't exactly a lie. Sakura won't leave his bedside, so I'm getting something for them. Kiba just hummed in response. After a pause, he spoke up again. Hey listen. Naruto turned to the Inuzuka and saw him looking dead serious. For once, that kid Sasuke asked about Gaara. Naruto stood up straight with a frown. The food forgotten for a moment. Yeah, what about him? I don't know what's ahead, but tell your teammates to back off or forfeit if they have to fight him. You see something in the forest? Naruto asked/guessed. Now as serious as Kiba. Kiba nodded. Yeah, we found him in a showdown with three aim genin guys. Tough as gourd, is full of sand that moves like it's got a will of its own. It blocked everything they threw at him. Naruto frowned. Yeah, that sounds pretty tough to get through, but that isn't the problem. Kiba cut him off, his voice hard. After Gaara showed the guy he couldn't win, he sent the sand after him. He covered the guy in it. He could have just choked him out. He gritted his teeth as his eyes narrowed. Instead, he lifted him into the air and crushed him like a tomato. His blood went all over the place. It covered the whole clearing. The other two gave up their scroll and begged him to let them go, but it didn't matter. He killed them both the same way. Naruto's eyes had been widening through Kiba's story. He would have thought Kiba was exaggerating, but he'd never seen such a look on Kiba's face before. He was staring hard at the ground. There was frustration there, something he was familiar with, but more than that, there was fear. His fist was trembling at his side, and he noticed his dog Akamaru was trying to duck back under his head, shivering and letting out quiet whimpers. When Kiba looked up at him, his expression was serious. That guy will go out of his way to kill you, so don't give him the chance. To Naruto, looking equally serious, nodded. Thanks for the warning. I'll tell Sasuke and Sakura what you said. With a groan, Sasuke began to stir. His eyes cracked open, and slowly the ceiling came into view. He soon noticed that the pain from the curse mark was gone. Well glad that worked out, he sat up and felt some resistance in his muscles. His body was a bit stiff from being immobile for a full day. He could feel some of his joints popping as he rose and let the sheets fall off of him. Sakura's voice got his attention. He looked up to see his pink-haired teammate standing at his bedside. Are you okay? He nodded. Yeah, I feel a lot better now, the Uchiha answered before taking a breath and channeled chakra into his eyes. Crimson bled into those cold Sharingan. Thankfully he found no discomfort this time. With a sigh he let his bloodline fade. He placed a hand over the now dormant seal. Looks like it worked good. It'd be a pain to go through the next round with a handicap. He then looked around. Where's Naruto? He went to get some food. He said he'd bring back an extra helping since it was around the time Lord Hokage said you'd wake up. Sakura answered, putting some pressure on his neck. He tilted his head and felt more popping from his bones before he stretched. Has anyone we know shown up? Sasuke asked. Sakura nodded. I haven't left the room, but Naruto said he ran into that Fu girl he mentioned. He also saw Shino Lee and one of Gaara's teammates. Sasuke processed that information. So Team 10 was still in the forest then, and it looked like they had some pretty tough competition, but that was fine with him. It was part of why he'd been excited for the exams in the first place. He threw off the blanket covering him and swung his legs over the side of the bed, taking a few moments to stretch. It was then that the door opened. He turned to see Naruto enter the room holding 3 containers. The blonde smiled. Hey Sasuke, glad to see you up and about again. He held up one of the containers. Got a sandwich and some rice balls for you. I wasn't sure when you'd wake up, so I figured I'd stick with things that you could eat cold. Thanks, Sasuke said as he stood up. Just set them down on that table. He then walked towards the bathroom. Half an hour later and the 3 were sitting at the table in their room eating their meal. Naruto had gotten some barbecue pork for himself, soup and anko dumplings for Sakura, and a BLT and some rice balls with tomatoes for him. Has anyone else shown up here? Sasuke asked after swallowing a bite. Naruto shrugged. Not as far as I know. I did run into Kiba at the cafeteria though. Oh, what's up? Sakura asked. Naruto frowned as he looked down at his food. Well, we got to arguing as always, but he gave me a warning before he left. He looked up at Gaara. He said he's dangerous. Sasuke rolled his eyes like we didn't already know that. Naruto nodded, his brow still in a deep furrow. That's what I said, but then Kiba told me his team saw him back in the forest. He straight up massacred a team from AIM. Even after 2 of them gave up, he said the whole clearing they fought and got covered in blood. Sakura flinched while Sasuke shared Naruto's expression. It sounded like the way the guy's team acted around him was justified. Did he say how? Naruto nodded. That gore on his back. He then explained what Kiba saw, how Gaara controlled sand and how he used it. Nice of him to give us a heads up. Sasuke nodded in agreement. Sakura took a breath. Okay, so we avoid fighting him if we can. She looked at Naruto. Anything else noteworthy? Nope, it's pretty boring around here, Naruto replied with a shrug. What you been up to while I was out? Can't imagine you'd stay cooped up here for long, Sasuke asked. He couldn't see Naruto sitting quietly in the room if he knew he was okay. Sakura smiled. Oh, he's been working on his sealing jutsu, she answered for him before turning to Naruto with a smirk. Well, that and hanging out with his new friend. They spent the whole day cloud watching. Oh, so Naruto pretty much sat still all day. Well, that was interesting. Naruto just chuckled and rubbed the back of his head. Well, you know she's fun to be around and there's nothing else to do around here, and I don't think she gets out much from what she's told me. Something seemed to occur to him then, and he looked at his 2 teammates. Hey, how about I take you to meet her? She sounds like she could use some more friends. He and Sakura looked at each other before Sakura shrugged. I was going to see how Tenten's team was doing, but I don't see why not. There's still a whole day. Sasuke grunted in agreement. Honestly, he just wanted to make sure his teammate wasn't getting played. Naruto could be a surprisingly good judge of character sometimes. That said, even if he was better about it than he used to be, he was still really optimistic, and that could make him too trusting. For rocked back and forth on her feet, looking out the window where she and Naruto had reunited. She could easily count yesterday as one of her best. Sure, it hadn't exactly been the most exciting, but spending the day with a new friend had made her so happy she'd been smiling for the rest of the night. Right up until she'd fallen asleep she was so looking forward to when they could leave this tower so Naruto could make good on his promise to show her around Konoha. It was just too bad that her team hadn't wanted to come with her, but oh well, she had time to win them over. She was sure she would, but for now she was waiting on Naruto. They'd agreed to meet up here again and she was so excited she'd left a bit early, but it should be just about time. Sure enough, a few minutes later she heard footsteps approaching, and not just one pair. Was she about to make even more friends? She turned around smiling when she saw Naruto and his team approach. Naruto, and you brought your team, she said as she ran to meet them. Yep, Naruto replied with a wave as she ran towards them. This is Sakura, Haruno, and Sasuke Uchiha, he said, gesturing towards them. Sakura smiled and waved at her while Sasuke just nodded towards her, silently appraising her. Guys, this is so nice to meet you, let's all be friends, the mint-haired girl said with excitement, holding out her hand. Just like that? Sakura asked, raising a brow. She then shrugged. Well, Naruto says you're alright, and you did help him back in the forest, so sure I guess, she said, taking her hand. Her face lit up even brighter as joy swept through her. Hoo, that's twice as many friends as I had before. Sakura raised a brow and looked slightly perplexed. Twice? Fu nodded quickly. One of my goals is to make 100 friends. Naruto blinked. 100? Sounds nice. Any reason you're aiming for so many? Fu smiled and put her hands on her hips. My village chief said I should, and wouldn't it be great to have friends no matter where you are? Sakura frowned for a moment but nodded. Okay, kinda odd, but Fu then turned to Sasuke looking hopeful, but the Uchiha shook his head. I don't call someone a friend lightly. Ask again when I know you better. Still, that was a definite maybe, which was better than no. Fu looked disappointed for a moment before she brightened up. Okay, I will. She then looked at all three. So is there anything you want to do, or should we go cloud watching again? There isn't much else to do here, is there? Naruto asked with a shrug. Maybe we can trade stories, Fu asked, putting her hands together. Stories? What kind of stories? Sasuke asked with a frown. Anything interesting, like the time I snuck out of the hospital and had the staff looking all over trying to find me, or the time I went exploring around the village and found this huge lake. Fu explained. Sakura chuckled while Naruto grinned excitedly. Oh boy, in that case Naruto's got enough stories to last all day. You're looking at Konoha's #1 prankster, Naruto said proudly, pointing a thumb at himself. I'll tell you all about the best tricks I ever pulled. Do tell me more. After spending half an hour on the roof with the girl, Sasuke could say he was pretty sure she wasn't trying to play Naruto. He'd suspected the girl was genuine from how her eyes had lit up the moment she saw them. Not an absolute sign that she wasn't just a good actor, but the eyes were said to be the window to the soul. For a reason he'd been a bit suspicious when she asked to share stories, but it had become clear she was just interested in entertaining stories from their day-to-day lives. She seemed to love hearing about the pranks Naruto had pulled. She was apparently something of a troublemaker too. She wasn't a prankster, but Fu was as hyperactive as Naruto was and had a similar tendency to do what she wanted from the sound of it. So what sort of things do you do for fun around Taki? Naruto asked. Fu looked at him before turning her eyes to the sky and placing a finger on her chin. Well, I like to dance and explore outside the village. There are lots of lakes and underwater caves that I can swim through, and I always hope to find something new. I have a few other hobbies I picked up for one reason or another, and when I can't do anything else I go cloud watching. And they let you look around outside of Taki? I hadn't stepped outside Konoha until my first mission, Naruto said. When did I say they let me? Fu replied, leaning toward him with a grin. Both of them chuckled while he and Sakura shared a look. Yep, they were two peas in a pod. The jury was out on whether that was a good or bad thing. And how about you guys? Fu asked. Sasuke shrugged. I don't do much besides training. Unless these two drag me along for something, I'll usually walk around the village. If I need to unwind, I read and play trivia games and crossword puzzles. Kinda boring, I know, but that's about it, Sakura answered. Doesn't sound boring to me. Mind if I play with you sometime? The Taki Kunoichi asked hopefully. Sure, Sakura replied, and Fu made a happy squeal. That was something else he'd noticed. She seemed really excited to do things with other people. That was odd. Naruto hadn't exactly had any friends before the wave mission before they'd really become a team, and Sasuke had learned about his mother's wish, but while that was partly due to how the adults treated him, the way he kept making a fool of himself in class and his tendency to brag when he couldn't back up his words hadn't helped with the other kids, from the mint-haired girl's behavior and from how her team had refused to join her twice now. She didn't seem to have many friends, either strange friendly as she was he'd have thought someone would be close to her, even if she had to drag them kicking and screaming into her circle. And Yufu asked, turning to Naruto. The blonde Uzamaki placed his hands behind his head. You know how much I love pranks. Aside from that, I keep some houseplants and practice writing and calligraphy. Never thought about calligraphy. Maybe I should try my hand at that once I get back to Taki. I'll give anything a try once," Fu mused before she sat up and looked out to the forest. "I wish we could go back into the forest. There's so much I didn't get to see," she said wistfully. "You want to go back in there?" Sakura looked at her incredulously. "Yeah, I saw so many things that I never knew existed. There were tigers as big as sheds and a giant centipede, and I've only seen one tree bigger than these. One, not a forest of them. Isn't it awesome? It's nothing like the land around Taki," Fu exclaimed, throwing her arms out. She then looked out to the woods with her hands eagerly clasped in front of her chest. "There's so much in this world to see. I want to explore it all someday and make friends everywhere I go." "That wasn't a bad dream to have," he supposed, "and as a kunoichi, Fu will probably get to see a lot of it at one point or another." Still, he wasn't going to drop his guard around a foreign ninja during these exams, whether she seemed harmless or not. "Naruto," Sasuke said, getting the blonde's attention. He turned to see the Uchiha looking up at the sky. "It's about time we head back." Sakura had already left a while ago to find 1010 and see how she was doing. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki looked up and sighed while Fu looked from his teammate back to him. "Yeah, you're probably right. We've gotta get ready for tomorrow." "Huh, already?" Fu asked dejectedly. "Sorry, we've got some things to work on to get ready for the next stage." "Whatever it is," Naruto replied before smiling, "but we're still on for that tour of the village once we're out of the forest." Fu brightened up and nodded, her hands forming eager fists before her chest. "All right, I'm looking forward to it." Naruto thought that now was a good time to warn her, since it wouldn't weigh on her mind while they relaxed and enjoyed themselves. "Before we go, there's something I need to tell you," he began, causing her to blink. She saw Naruto's features shift and grew concerned. "What is it?" "Someone gave me a heads up about a certain someone you know." Gaara frowned. "The redhead with the gourd?" "Yeah, I remember him. Seemed kinda unfriendly like," she said after a pause, clearly not wanting to come off as rude. "That might be the understatement of the year," Naruto replied with a grimace. For raised a brow at that. "My old classmate Kiba ran into him in the forest facing off with some aim gen, and he and his team decided to watch how it all played out. Good thing too, or they'd all be dead." Fu's frown turned to dismay. "What? Why, that gourd of his is full of sand, and he controls it. It moves around to attack and defend for him," the blonde explained. "He told me Gaara uses it to encase people." Naruto held out an open palm, "and when he catches you," he closed his hand into a fist. The mint-haired girl took a step back, her face a picture of disturbed disbelief at those words. That's such a messed up way to fight." Naruto shook his head grimly. "The way I heard it, it wasn't a fight at all. Gaara had him in seconds, and then when he was at his mercy." Naruto didn't finish. He didn't need to. Fu had looked increasingly horrified through those last words, and was now staring at him with her mouth agape. That she couldn't finish. Her disgust and horror had robbed her of words. "That's not even the worst of it," Naruto continued to a disbelieving. "For the guy's teammates begged for their lives, gave up their scroll and everything, but it didn't matter. He didn't care. He killed them too." He met her gaze, a steely look in his eyes. "You need to watch out and tell your team too." She closed her eyes for a second, and when she looked at him, all of her usual cheer was gone. In its place was a seriousness he hadn't seen from her before. "Okay, got it." They parted ways soon after, and now Naruto and Sasuke were walking the halls in silence. The blonde stopped and blinked as they neared the room when a familiar voice reached them. "So this is where you guys is staying for now," said a voice that just sounded done with everything. "Aha, we're free to pick anyone we want, so just make yourselves at home. No offense, but you guys look like you can use a rest." Sakura said it. "You don't know the half of it," he heard Ino say. He rounded the corner to find that sure enough Sakura was standing with Team 10 in front of their room. Well, look what the cat dragged in, Naruto said as he and Sasuke walked joined them. Glad you guys made it, Sasuke Ino cried happily. You look great. I was so worried when Sakura told us what happened to you. HN was Sasuke's patented response. He felt sorry for Ino. It was pretty obvious even to him that Sasuke just wasn't into her, and with how long she'd been at it he didn't see that changing anytime soon. Well, nice to see you've made a full recovery, Choji said. I guess we were right about how this is all going to go down, Shikamaru commented. They didn't need any further explanation on what he meant. Yep, we're just going to have to hope for the best, I guess, Naruto replied. I was afraid you weren't going to make it for a second. How'd you guys manage out there? It was horrible, Choji groaned. We ran out of food after we left you on the second day. And whose fault was that? Ino snapped at him. Besides, you should take it as a lesson. She crossed her arms. Sometimes there's no way we'll be able to bring enough rations to keep us full for a whole mission. We need to learn to live off the land at some point. Naruto raised a brow. Were they just now learning that it looked like Kakashi-sensei wasn't the only jonin who needed to kick it in gear? Hell, he didn't even know why they were complaining. At least they brought food. His team hadn't brought anything but water. He saw Sakura sigh and shake her head. It looked like she thought so too. Ugh, I didn't think we were going to make it back there. We kept running into guys that were stronger than us, Ino groaned. If we hadn't got the drop on those 3 from Ain, we'd still be out there. Well, at least you made it here soon enough to kick your feet up for a bit, Naruto replied. With you guys here, all of this year's rookies made it. Shikamaru raised a brow. Really, Kiba's team's already here? Huh, yeah, they were here before we were, Naruto said before something occurred to him. Hey Sakura, you give them the heads up Kiba gave us yet? Sakura shrugged. I was going to once they got settled. And heads up about what? Shikamaru asked, looking more alert than usual. We'll explain once you find a room, Sasuke said, jabbing his head at the doors. At around noon the next day an announcement rang out throughout the tower to gather in one of its central chambers. Teams 7 and 10 made their way through the halls together. When they stepped through the large doors they found they weren't the first to reach the room. Naruto's brows rose as he saw Kabuto and 2 similarly dressed teens standing together. The older boy smiled and gave them a nod, which he returned. Fu's team had also arrived. She was standing alongside a boy with spiky brown hair that stood straight up. He wore a blue jacket with shoulder guards over a yellow shirt and brown shorts. Beside them was a taller boy with straight black hair that went down past his shoulders, a gray shirt and matching pants. The Suna teen was there too. Fu was glancing warily at Gaara before she noticed Naruto's team. She smiled and waved at Naruto and his team, and he and Sakura did the same. Sasuke just settled for a nod. He briefly glanced at Gaara himself, standing at the lead of his team with his arms crossed. Then he looked at all the people lined up facing them. Finally there was Lee's team alongside the 2 he recognized. There was another. He had long brown hair and wore a beige shirt with dark brown shorts and bandages around his left arm and leg. His eyes were the same featureless white as Hinata's. It had to be that Niji guy Lee mentioned. There stood the 3rd Hokage in the middle of Anko Ibiki and one other man he didn't recognize, a man clad in the standard attire of Konoha ninja. He had short brown hair and a bandana-style forehead protector. He had dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept well in a long time. Behind them stood the Jonin sensei of the genin who passed Kakashi was there, as was Guy, but that was it as far as people he recognized. There was a tall man with brown eyes, olive skin, short black spiky hair and a beard. He wore a standard Konoha uniform as most did, but his sleeves were rolled halfway up. He also wore a sash that had the kanji for fire around his waist. He had a pair of black bangles and bandages wrapped around the arms of his sleeves. Another was a slender brunette woman with long untamed hair reaching her upper back and red eyes with an additional ring. She wore makeup consisting of red lipstick and purple eyeshadow and wore a red mesh armor blouse with only the right sleeve visible. Finally, for Konoha Jonin, there was a man with glasses and sandy blonde hair wearing the standard Konoha attire. There were a few other Jonin from other villages. One had to be Fu Sensei, a man with spiky black hair and tan skin like hers. He wore a dark violet vest with 2 scrolls attached to it, a light violet turtleneck and dark green colored pants. Another was a man from Oto, which Naruto realized meant those three had passed too. He wore a purple flak jacket with a black shirt and matching pants. He had chalky white skin with long black hair tied in a ponytail. And lastly, a tall Suna Jonin wearing their village's version of the standard shinobi attire. He had red markings on the right side of his face, the only visible part of his head, with the rest being covered by his turban-like headgear and by a sheet hanging from it on the left side of his face. The two teams took their places and slowly the others began to trickle into the room. Kiba's team was next, followed by the Oto Gen, and Naruto smirked when Zaka threw him a dirty look, his arm still in a sling. Finally, Team Guy entered the room. Last Anko wasn't kidding, not even half of us made it out of that forest, Naruto observed as he looked around. Still looks like we had a pretty big turnout. I wonder what they're going to throw at us next. Listen up, Lord Hokage is about to explain the third test, so you better pay attention, Anko announced, silencing the quiet murmurs that had been going on among the teams. Lord Hokage, they're all yours. The Hokage hummed an affirmative and stepped forward. First, before I explain what the third exam entails, I'd like to explain something about the Chunin exams themselves. Listen closely. I will now explain the true purpose of these exams. True purpose, what did that mean? Although he had to say he thought it was kind of weird that they held these exams with other nations like this. I'm sure some of you have wondered why our village holds these exams together with our allies to raise the standards of our shinobi and develop friendships across allied, to be sure, but they hold a deeper purpose, Hiruzen said before closing his eyes. After a pause he continued, they serve as a substitute for battle between allied nations. What does that mean? A voice Naruto didn't recognize asked. A glance told him it was the girl on Lee's team. He realized that had to be 10-10. In the past, all of these allied nations once fought with each other for power and influence. To avoid wasting lives, the nations selected champions to fight for their countries. While these exams certainly exist to determine which shinobi are worthy of becoming Chunin, that is not their only purpose. They also exist so those prospective Chunin may fight for the pride and prestige of their nations at the risk of their very lives. Pride of our nations, Naruto asked. During the final stage of these exams, many leaders and prominent people will be invited to observe as guests. Those leaders will take note of the strength of each nation's shinobi. The better a village's young shinobi perform, the more favorable the impression they take away, and the more likely they are to hire the ninja of that village. Thus, these exams influence the number of jobs each village is likely to receive, as well as their power when negotiating with other nations. So why do we have to risk our lives? Kiba asked. Because a shinobi's true strength is only achieved when it's pushed to its limits, such as in a life and death battle. It's because your life is on the line that you can display your true power and the power of your village. Thus you will fight with your lives, your dreams, and the pride of your village on the line, just like Shibuki told me. Fu nodded to herself with a smile. Well, it's better than an all-out fight between nations, Naruto said, crossing his arms. Then he smirked, and it gives us a chance to show our stuff to every big name out there, yeah, and every other village ally or otherwise, Sasuke pointed out with a frown. Just get on with it, Gaara said impatiently. Very well, listen closely and I will explain to you the nature of the third exam, the Hokage said, placing his hands behind his back. The leader of Konoha was then interrupted, as the Konoha shinobi in the bandana vanished, reappearing down on one knee in front of the old man in a burst of speed. Lord Hokage, before you do, please allow me, Heiei Gecko, proctor of the third exam, to speak. The now named Heiei said. Very well, the Hokage nodded. When the man turned, Naruto's brows rose. Now that he got a better look at him, he did not look good. The man had dark circles under his dull eyes, and as soon as he turned he put his hand to his mouth and broke into a brief coughing fit. Is this guy sick or something? Naruto couldn't help but wonder. Before we actually explain the third exam, I need you all to do something. We're going to hold a preliminary exam to determine who will participate in the exam's final stage, Heiei explained once he calmed down. Whoa, preliminary? What do you mean? Shikamaru asked loudly. Knowing him, he was probably frustrated that there would be even more work for them. To be frank, there are too many participants remaining. Whether it's because of your talent Or because the exams were too easy this year, as Lord Hokage said, VIPs from all over the nations will spectate during the final stage. As such, we can't afford to waste their time by having the third exam take too long. Hayate explained. He gave them a moment, his eyes roaming the assembled genin. When no one spoke up, he continued, anyway, we will begin immediately. Any who wish quit after these explanations, please come forward. What right now? Kiba asked, who would throw in the towel after coming this far. Naruto couldn't help but wonder. His question was immediately answered when Kabuto raised his hand. Excuse me, I'd like to forfeit. The purple-clad teen said. Huh, seriously? Naruto asked incredulously as he and most of the others in the room turned to look at him. Sorry, Naruto, Kabuto said, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. My team and I just got here. I got banged up pretty bad back in the forest. I'm just not in any shape to get into a fight right now. He did look a lot more scuffed than the others here. Now that Naruto looked at him, I'd like to continue, but I'd be at too much of a disadvantage. Are you sure? I mean, yeah, that's kinda a good point, but it's not like we'd have much choice out in the field, you know. Naruto pointed out. True, but this isn't the field. I've got a choice, and I'm making it. Hayate coughed, getting their attention. He looked down at a list and said, Kabuto Yakushi of Konoha. Correct, you may go. He then looked over the other genin. Oh, and I forgot to mention, from now on you will all fight individually, so judge solely for yourself. Naruto watched as Kabuto left before turning to the proctor. No one else raised their hand. After a few moments of silence, the proctor nodded. Very well then, let's begin the preliminary exam. Hayate said, his dull eyes roaming over the assembled genin. As I said, from here on the fights will be one-on-one, and you're expected to fight as if they are real-life confrontations, as you did in the forest. Since we have 23 entrants, we'll have 11 matches. The winners of those matches will advance to the finals. The lucky odd one out will get a free ride. As for the rules, basically there are none. The fight will continue until one side forfeits or is unable to battle, whether that means they're incapacitated, knocked out, or killed. Be aware of your limits if you don't want to die. However, if I decide the match has been decided, I'll step in and end things, and will determine your matches by Hayate. 10 half turned and looked at the wall behind the jonin. The genin followed his gaze above a state of two hands forming a hand sign where a curtain fell to reveal this electronic scoreboard, which will select two of you at random. I know it's sudden, but we will decide the first match immediately. With that, the board came to life. Yellow letters appeared on its surface, rapidly shifting through names on either side of the word VS. The genin watched as the first match was decided, and it settled on Ino Yamanaka versus Temari. Naruto winced. He heard Sakura suck in a breath behind him and turned to see her looking worried at her friend. He then threw a glance at Temari. The other blonde huffed, placing a hand on her hip and cocking her head as her teal eyes went from the board to the platinum blonde. She didn't look impressed, to say the least. Oh boy, Naruto thought to himself as he looked from her to Ino, who looked at Temari with some concern before steeling herself and glaring, probably because she was Gaara's teammate. He remembered Ino was about on par with Sakura back in the academy. If she needed anywhere near as much work as his pink-haired teammate had, this is going to be ugly. Temari struck him as a tough, no-nonsense kunoichi who probably wouldn't hold back or show any sympathy towards her opponent, and that was before considering she was Gaara's teammate. Ino would probably get no mercy. In short order, the genin had assembled on galleries lining either side of the room, with their jonin sensei Konoha shinobi on the right, all foreign ninja on the left. Naruto glanced at Sakura, who leaned forward and clutched the railing as she looked down at her friend. Don't worry, Sakura, I'm sure the proctor will step in before it gets too bad. I hope so, Sakura muttered. I'll keep an eye on things if it helps, Sasuke said. Both looked at him to find his eyes had turned crimson. Oh right, Sasuke had told him his eyes had an upgrade. Good, the jonin would have a little warning if things were about to go too far. Thanks, Sakura replied gratefully. Hey, come on, aren't you two supposed to be old friends? Have a Little Faith Ino-sensei set his hands in his pockets and a lit cigarette in his mouth. Tenten looked at Sakura sympathetically. Sakura, you told me Ino was your rival, right? Where would you put her right now? About where I was when we met. Just throw in some clan jutsu came Sakura's dull reply. Tenten just grimaced. Shikamaru gave a worried murmur as he looked down at his teammate mirroring Sakura's stance. Choji munched his potato chips faster than usual. Wait, where'd he get that? Oh, his sensei must have brought them. Ino glared at her opponent down below. Temari regarded her with a bored expression with one hand on the fan on her back and began. Hey, yelled Temari, immediately shot forward raising her fan over her head like a club. Ino leaped back to dodge as it crashed into the ground with enough force to kick up a dust cloud that obscured Temari. That was her first and last mistake in this fight. The dust was suddenly blown away to reveal Temari swinging her fan with one movement. She had spun on her heel and unfurled it halfway through. She unleashed a wind blast that drove Ino back. The wind compressed and twisted into a whirlwind that engulfed her. The Yamanaka heiress screamed as it dragged her through the air. Countless wind blades cut into her skin, scattering small spurts of blood through the air. The whirlwind twisted and drove her into the ground, the impact kicking up another cloud of dust. When it cleared, Ino lay in a small crater of broken tiles. She was unmoving and covered in bleeding wounds. Naruto sucked in a breath through clenched teeth. Yep, that's what he'd been afraid of. Sasuke just closed his eyes and shook his head. What a waste of time, Temari grumbled, folding her fan and slamming its tip into the ground. Ino is unable to battle. The winner is Temari. Hey, declared Shikamaru, face palmed. Ah geez, Team 10's leader winced. Maybe we need a bit more work than I thought. Sakura sighed, looking down at her rival as a pair of medic mean took her away on a stretcher. Ino, well, hopefully this gets her to turn things around. Fangirls tend not to last long, as Kunoichi Tenten said to Sakura, trying to find the silver lining in this situation. Oof, way to make a first impression for us, Kiba said with a grimace, closing one eye and looking away. Asuma, how much of their training did you leave up to their clans? Kurinai asked, lightly glaring at the other Jonin. Asuma rubbed the back of his head. Well, given how they're all the heirs of the previous Inoshikacho trio, I thought it'd be best to leave it to them to help out with their clan jutsu and teamwork skills. I've been helping with the latter, of course, and helped them even out some edges, but in other words, you've been slacking nearly as much as Shikamaru, Naruto said, raising a brow. You know, I could take that as an insult, Shikamaru pointed out while Asuma chuckled and looked away. Don't let it get you down, Asuma. Youth is littered with sour moments like this, but there are always sweet ones to follow, guy said before giving him a thumbs up with a sparkling smile. I'm sure this is the spark that will see Ino's youth burn brightly, hopefully, though I don't think that'll save me from getting chewed out by my old man for that performance. Asuma mused, looking worriedly at the third who was glaring at him. Naruto blinked, looking between the two rapidly, before gaping, whoa, old man, Okage's your dad. Yep, oh, by the way, I've been meaning to thank you. I hear you're responsible for giving my nephew a much needed wake-up call. Oh, you mean Konohamaru? Naruto grinned widely, putting his hands behind his head. Yeah, he's a good kid. I'm sure he'll be Hokage after me someday, he said, getting a scoff from Kiba. He glared, but before he could say anything, Kakashi put his hand on his shoulder. Well, I'm sure you'd like to get into it with your old classmate right now. The next match is about to start. Naruto looked up at the board. Sure enough, it had come back to life, now that both combatants had been taken off the field. They all watched Lee raising an eager fist as they waited to see the next matchup, Chi-Chi versus Kiba Inuzuka. All right, looks like I'm up, Kiba said with a wide grin, pounding a fist into his open palm. You ready, Akamaru? He asked the dog on his head, who barked back in response. That wasn't a name he recognized, and so Naruto realized there were only two people it could be. Just as he'd guessed, he saw one of the Taki shinobi. The one with black hair began to walk towards the arena. He couldn't make out what was said, but it looked like Fu said something, but he couldn't see any response from her teammate. She took a few steps back and rested against the wall. Naruto frowned, but remained silent as Kiba jumped over the railing and quickly took his spot while the Taki Nin took the long away. In short order, the two stood across from each other. The Taki Nin raised a brow. You brought a puppy along? Jichi asked. Yep, Akamaru's my partner, Kiba said as the dog leaped off of his head. He crouched down and pet Akamaru's head, getting a happy bark in return. Don't underestimate him just because he's on the small side. The Taki ninja shrugged his shoulders. I'm more of a cat person myself. Ninja cats seem so much more useful. Kiba's eye twitched and Akamaru barked angrily. Hey, don't you dare insult my partner. And are you seriously going to start that old argument again? Just stating facts. Ever hear of a ninja hound using genjutsu? Jichi replied, getting a growl from both the dog and his owner in turn. And begin. Hey, called. Kiba kneeled down and made a hand seal before placing his hands on the ground. His fingers tensed as his nails grew into claws, and he seemed to grow a bit more feral. Let's go, Akamaru, the boy called, getting a bark as they charged at the Taki ninja. 2-on-1, Jichi stated as he tensed. He then leaped backward as he ran through hand seals. He inhaled deeply before spraying a powerful gust of water from his mouth. The ninja and dog pair dodged to either side, the boy jumping into the air when he turned his head, causing the torrent to sweep to the side. As they closed the distance, Jichi made another hand seal, Takigakure style water-cutting sword. Water gathered in his palm and formed a sword. He swept it through the air once before pointing the jagged tip at the approaching genin before launching himself at him. Kiba kicked back to avoid a slash. Jichi spun into a kick aimed at Akamaru, but the tiny dog kicked itself to the side and bit at him, forcing him to jump back. Jichi was a skilled swordsman, but he was gradually forced back. Kiba would duck and weave around his watery blade as Akamaru proved an agile and hard-to-hit target, keeping the tall boy from really pressing his master. Eventually he kicked back, flipped his sword into a reverse grip and tossed it at Kiba like a javelin. The Inuzuka ducked under the blade, which stuck in the ground and melted into a puddle. The boy dropped a smoke bomb from his pouch, which immediately exploded into a smokescreen as Kiba charged towards it. A hail of kunai erupted from the smog. He and his dog dodged to opposite sides, sliding across the ground before launching themselves at their hidden foe. Ha, if you think something like that's going to slow us down, then you've got another thing coming, Kiba said. They entered the quickly vanishing cloud from nearly opposite directions. The sound of a blow rang out the moment before the last of the smog faded, revealing Jichi falling back, Kiba's claw on his face and Akamaru biting into his leg, or so it seemed, as Jichi fell apart into water. What? Kiba exclaimed. That Sakura began recognizing a water clone just as he and Sasuke did. The real Jichi emerged from a puddle behind them, both hands running through Seal's water style water prison. Water on the ground rose and encased the boy and his hound, immobilizing them in a sphere of water. Well, that's game, Jichi said. Kiba gritted his teeth from within the water and glared at his opponent, but there was nothing else he could do. Kiba is unable to battle. The winner is Jichi. Hayate said. Yes, way to show what Taki ninja are made of. Foot cheered from her spot above. And now we're 0 for 2. We're off to a great start, Shikamaru grumbled. Jichi released his prison and put his hands in his pockets as his opponents landed on their feet. Good match. Maybe pay more attention to your surroundings, though. I wasn't trying to hide back there, I was trying to keep you from thinking about the water. Yeah, thanks for the advice, Kiba said begrudgingly as he rose to his feet. You're pretty good, see you around, Jichi said, walking back and waving over his shoulder. A bitter-looking Kiba made his way back to his team, glaring down at the floor. Kurenai sighed. Kiba's going to be nursing that blow to his pride for a while. Naruto chuckled. Serves him right for having such a big head. Sakura giggled at his side. Oh, that's rich coming from you. Who was it who said he'd introduce everyone's faces to the floor again? Sasuke wondered aloud, smirking at him. Naruto rubbed the back of his head with a sheepish grin. Ah, come on guys, don't gang up on me like that. Well, looks like it's time to put your money where your mouth is, Kakashi-sensei said, drawing his attention. He pointed him to the board above, which had settled on the next match, Naruto Uzumaki versus Niji Hyuga. Naruto grinned confident as he stared at the board. raising a fist in front of his chest. "Yes, my turn, time to show what I can do," Kiba snickered, having retaken his place with his team. "I don't know what you're so happy about, you just crapped out." Naruto turned to glare at his former classmate as Neji scoffed and made his way down to the arena below, his face blank. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Guy chuckled. "I'm afraid Kiba's right on this one, Naruto. Out of my whole team, no, in fact, I'm certain he's the strongest genin of our village." "Says you," Naruto scoffed. "Guess I'll just have to prove you wrong. Don't lose down there." Naruto Sakura said, "I'm expecting to see you in the finals. Don't disappoint me." Sasuke added, "Don't worry you guys, I'll be back up here in a minute." Naruto replied, confident, as he leaped down to the floor. Hinata gazed at the blonde worriedly. "Naruto, he's doomed," Kiba said, leaning against the wall behind him with his hands in his pockets. "I wouldn't be so sure," Shikamaru said. "Trust me, we saw him in action back in the forest. He's not the Naruto we knew anymore. Well, it's only to be expected that he'd grow by leaps and bounds. That's the beauty of youth, but I'm afraid it won't be enough to overcome Neji's skill," Guy said, closing his eyes and crossing his arms. "You sure about that, Guy?" Kakashi asked at ease. "How about we make a wager?" That was the last thing Naruto heard before he was out of earshot. In short order he found himself standing across from Neji. The older boy seemed unimpressed. "I had thought some of this year's rookies seemed interesting, but to think you're the one I'd have to face," the Hyuga mused aloud. "I was hoping for a challenge." Naruto glares at the Hyuga. "You underestimate anyone you die. The old man taught me that." He was sure the third was happy. He actually listened. "Yeah, I sucked at the academy, but you know what, who gives a damn? It doesn't matter how many times you fall, you keep getting back up and back at it till you reach your goal. Everyone can call me dead last till they are blue in the face, but I'll be the one smiling when I prove them all wrong." Nice speech. "It'll be fun to watch when reality sets and your fate was decided the moment you were pit against me," Neji replied, getting into a fighting stance. Naruto scoffed. "Fate, huh? Get him." Naruto foot cheered him on. He sent a brief smile her way before turning his attention back to Neji and began. "Hey, announced Bushy Brow said, "This guy's stronger than he is. If Neji's fast enough to keep up with him, I should feel this guy out first," Naruto thought, as he formed a cross-shaped hand seal. In a burst of smoke, 4 clones of Naruto appeared before him. Neji tensed, his brow furrowed as he watched 2 of them charge towards him. As he slipped into a fighting stance, his eyes changed, veins bulging around his eyes as his solid white eyes changed. While still solid white, the shape of his pupils became visible. A dojutsu as the 2 clones reached him. Naruto and the remaining clones vanished with the body flicker technique. 2 appeared behind Neji, one aiming high from a crouch from the left and the other coming down in an axe kick at his right. Without even turning, Neji sidestepped both and grabbed the grounded clone by the arm. Naruto watched from atop the statue. Clone immediately twisted his body and kicked at Neji. The Hyuga leaned back, the attack passing within inches of his face, and jabbed the clone. He only struck with 1 finger, but the clone was destroyed. The remaining 3 clones pressed him, but none of their attacks got through. Punches were blocked, kicks evaded with minimal movement, but they at least kept him from retaliating. Finally, Neji got an opening. He ducked beneath a punch and struck a clone in the chest. With just 2 left, the remaining clones were quickly dispatched. Neji brushed aside a jab and stabbed the first clone in the chest before he shot forward. The remaining clone blocked several finger strikes, but then its arms grew weak and sluggish. It tried to put distance between them, but Neji quickly closed the gap and finished it off. As he turned to the real Naruto, the blonde drew a Fuma Shuriken and threw it at the older genin. Neji kicked himself to the side to avoid the oversized weapon and then jumped to avoid the second one hidden in its shadow. As Neji landed and continued on his way, the 2 weapons burst into smoke, revealing more clones. Each one threw a volley of shuriken at his back while Naruto ran through hand seals wind style. Divine Wind. A gust of wind spiraled into tornadoes that barreled towards the Hyuga. Neji immediately kicked back flipping over the weapons at his behind him. He evaded the tornadoes that carved through the tiled floor and more weapons at his back. With weaves and graceful flips, the 2 clones ran through hand signs themselves as he maneuvered himself between them, clapping their hands together. Both unleashed blasts of wind meant to sandwich him between them, only for the Hyuga to leap high in the air too. Wind blasts collided, carving a fissure into the ground as he landed on the opposite side of the arena from Naruto. He took a deep breath as he retook his fighting stance. "I may have underestimated you after all," he admitted before smirking. "This might actually be a challenge." Naruto grinned. "You keep talking like you're going to win." He pointed his thumb at his chest. "I'm the one who's going on to the finals." He's definitely more skilled than bushy brows. And the way he moves, it's like he has eyes in the back of his head. "You don't have so much as an ounce of doubt in those words," Neji observed, "but it doesn't matter in the end. Nothing one does can change their fate. You're just going to keep going back to that like a broken record, aren't you?" Naruto asked, raising a brow and looking annoyed. "It bears repeating, especially to someone ignorant of the truth. It's reality, like it or not. Fate determines everything, and what else could it have in store when pitting a top genin against the dead last of his class? That's not up to you to decide," Naruto said before forming the tiger seal. He vanished in a burst of speed, reappearing in the air above Neji with a downward kick. Neji blocked with his forearm, prepared to counter, only for his eyes to widen as Naruto formed another seal wind style air bullets. Naruto unleashed his jutsu at point-blank range. Neji was forced to jump back, dodging left and right to evade the pellets of air as Naruto's clones came at him from behind. One clone leaped in and Neji dodged a jab from the other and launched a strike at it, only for the clone to twist its body around the blow, turning into a sweeping kick that Neji ducked beneath. As that happened, Naruto created 8 more clones. The clones leaped out of the cloud surrounding Neji. They all charged from every direction. Naruto grinned on the inside as he ran through seals. "I've got you this time." Then Neji gasped. His eyes widened briefly and then narrowed suddenly. The next blow from one of his clones was blocked, not by any sort of movement, but a field of visible chakra. Then Neji began to spin. "Rotation, it can't be." Naruto heard Hinata cry from the audience above. He watched as a spinning dome of chakra formed around Neji. It carved a circle into the stone around him before it expanded. Naruto jumped back, but his clones were too close and were destroyed in an instant. "Damn it," Naruto cursed under his breath as he landed in a crouch. For a moment Neji stood there staring at the ground. Finally he looked up at Naruto. "Clever," he acknowledged. "You're quite the tricky opponent, aren't you? Aside from that opening, every move you've made was meant to lure me or conceal something else, though I shouldn't be surprised by misdirection coming from a prankster. I'd hazard a guess and say you didn't even intend to use a jutsu just now. Those hand signs and the clones attacking me were all a distraction for the 4 holding seal tags," he said, glancing to a paper tag, one of 4 floating down from above. Naruto gritted his teeth. How had he noticed that they were behind other clones? When they pulled those out, they were evenly spaced around me. "I assume you meant to form a proximity seal that would have left me immobilized, ending the match." Neji closed his eyes. "You probably could have caught Lee with something like that, but such tricks are useless before my eyes. Fate has already determined the outcome of this fight." Naruto clicked his tongue. Of course it had something to do with his dojutsu. He glared at the Hyuga. "Are you supposed to be a prophet or something? Who are you to decide that?" The blonde replied. "Maybe you're right. Maybe everything is decided by fate, but then how do you know what destiny has in store?" He then grinned as he slipped back into a fighting stance. "What's the point of paying any attention to stuff like that if you can't read it yourself? Our destiny is what we make of it." "Perhaps you have a point. One can't always know what fate's plan is, but there are times when it's obvious, like right now," Neji replied before charging forward. Naruto didn't know how his taijutsu style worked, but he'd seen enough to know close-range combat with Neji was a bad idea. Once again Naruto conjured more shadow clones and cloud formed and 4 doppelgangers burst forth to meet Neji. This time the Hyuga was having none of it. When the clones drew near, he immediately spun on his heel and used rotation. 2 of the clones were caught in the attack while the others kicked themselves back. Naruto drew 2 kunai and tossed them at Neji. Just as the dome of chakra faded, he ducked down and let them sail overhead, only for them to burst into smoke above him. 2 more clones appeared, one bringing down a fist, the other making an axe kick. Neji gritted his teeth and blocked both attacks with his forearms. Another clone used body flicker, driving a kick into his torso. In a burst of speed, Neji cried out as he was forced back by the blow. The 4 clones charged as he skidded to a halt, holding his stomach this time. They drew shuriken but kept their distance, preparing to throw the weapons. Neji took a breath and slipped into a stance Naruto hadn't seen before. His legs spread further apart as he held one hand before him, palm parallel to the ground and the other high in the air behind him. He suddenly moved as the weapons were thrown faster than Naruto had seen him move until now. He slapped them out of the air, closing the distance and destroying the clones in a few short moments before Naruto could do any more. Neji vanished. The blonde sensed him appear behind him and turned just in time to deflect a strike, brushing it aside and careful not to let Neji touch him. The Hyuga didn't give him a chance to form another hand sign, making rapid strikes aimed at his torso. Naruto deflected or dodged every attack but was on the defensive. Finally Naruto tried to leap back, but Neji saw it coming and was on him immediately. While he deflected a blow aimed at his chest, the next attack him home. He just barely managed to twist so that the blow struck his side. He grunted as pain lanced through his side. Thinking quickly, he dropped a ball of explosive seals out of his pocket. It was a small one, but both he and Neji still had to jump back to avoid the blast. That gave him enough time to prepare before Neji shot through the cloud of smoke. The next blow hit him in the chest, but he burst into smoke at the last second, a log falling to the ground in his place. He came down on Neji from above, crashing into the ground with enough force to shatter the tiles and kick up a cloud of debris. As the pale-eyed boy leaped back, Naruto formed a hand sign, inhaled and unleashed a single massive bullet of air. Neji kicked to the side to dodge before dancing around the smaller pellets that followed. It put some distance between them, but then Neji re-entered that stance he used earlier and Naruto knew his newest plan was dashed. Neji shot forward and Naruto saw only one move he could use to counter. 8 trigrams glowing chains burst from his back. To Neji's shock, they tore through the ground like butter, losing no speed before bursting out between him and Neji, forcing the Hyuga back. He backflipped and jerked from side to side as the chains burst from the ground, came down on him and tore through the earth before coming up from beneath him again. Finally they burst out from all around Neji, only for the Hyuga to spin into another rotation. The chains were forced back and vanished. Damn, I was hoping to save that for later. Naruto cursed under his breath. What was that? Neji asked with a frown. Naruto smirked cryptically. Wouldn't you like to know, Mr. Fate, the way he dodged my chains? He must be able to see chakra like Sasuke. That wasn't good. He'd found one of the advantages with those chains was how fast they could tear through the ground. They could pop out at any moment and blindside most opponents, but Sasuke's Sharingan could see chakra. During their spars, the Uchiha could see the chains moving through the ground and knew when and where they'd pop up. Neji's dojutsu must let him see chakra too. Hope you're ready because it's time I finish this. Once again the chains erupted from Naruto's back, curling around in the air above him and launching at Neji. The Hyuga jumped back to avoid the chains and then leaped into the air as they burst from the ground beneath him. Naruto immediately dismissed his chains and vanished with a body flicker. He reappeared in front of Neji, kicked him in his chest, sending him reeling back. As he formed a hand seal, he fired another air bullet at Neji, but he encased his hand in chakra, struck the blast with a palm strike, causing it to burst. Neji landed and threw shuriken. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki used a single chain to pull himself out of the way into the ground, flipping and landing in a crouch. Near the statue he launched another volley of air pellets, while Neji closed the distance as the Hyuga neared. Naruto once more sent his chains through the ground. They curled around and burst out from just in front of him, only for Neji to jump into the air to dodge. That was it. Naruto kicked himself back as Neji closed in, one arm raised before his chest in defense. He wouldn't be able to mold chakra for a jutsu or resummons the chains quickly enough, and Neji was poised to strike at his chest. He couldn't back up any further. Neji would probably try that 8 trigrams attack on him if he went to the sides. Neji had to think he'd caught him just like he wanted. He could tell his grin had alerted Neji to something being off. Naruto raised his other arm, reached into his sleeve and pulled out a sealed tag. The pale-eyed boy had just enough time for his shock to show before Naruto slammed his palm into it and flared his chakra. A vortex of wind burst from the seal at point-blank range. It slammed into Neji and drove him all the way into the far wall, with a cry of pain before it let up. Naruto summoned his chains once again. They reached Niji just as the wind vanished and ensnared the Hyuga. Naruto grinned, his arm outstretched. Niji struggled for a moment and then glowed blue as Naruto frowned. He was trying to force the chains back using something like that rotation attack. The chakra chains could completely seal chakra when mastered, but Naruto was far from that level. Still, they could restrain chakra. Even now, apparently not well enough. Fine, he had to make sure Niji wouldn't get back up. Then Naruto charged forward as he made the chains reel Niji, and cocking back his fist he punched Niji in the face with all his strength, sending him to the ground and driving him through the stone tiles. But he wasn't finished yet. He leaped into the air, flipping as the chains drew Niji closer again and brought down his foot right on the back of Niji's head. The blow sent him crashing into the ground and kicked up a cloud of dirt. Naruto landed with his back to his opponent as the chains vanished. He half-turned as the cloud began to clear. Niji was face down on the floor, his head in a small crater, and he wasn't moving. After a few moments the proctor called that Niji is unable to battle. The winner is Naruto Uzumaki. Great job, Naruto. Sakura cheered. Woohoo, congratulations, that was amazing, yelled the blonde. Uzumaki smiled at them and then huffed, leaned forward with his hands on his knees. So how's that for a dead last? He glanced over to the third, who proudly gave a single nod and grin. At that he felt his heart swell with pride. Sasuke smirked as he leaned back against the wall with his arms crossed. He hadn't expected anything less. It was too bad Naruto had taken Niji out, though he seemed like a good opponent to test himself against. Oh well, there was still plenty of competition. Niji lost 10-10, uttered in disbelief, staring at her down teammate in shock. Lee seemed to be in a similar state beside her. So you were saying Gai? Kakashi asked nonchalantly to his eternal rival, who was gaping down at the arena. What the hell? Kiba gaped down at the arena as Naruto began to make his way towards the stairs. What was all that? Told you he wasn't the Naruto we remembered anymore, Shikamaru said with a smirk. That was amazing, Hinata said as she looked at the blonde with a smile before her gaze turned to Niji as Guy recovered from his shock and leaped down into the arena. Her expression was hard to read. There was sympathy there, but more than what he'd expect for someone who lost a fight. Sasuke guessed there was some history between her and her relative. Well, it's not like she was the only one with family issues. Guy returned, laying Niji down against the wall before righting himself. For a moment he stood silent, then he gave a boisterous laugh, having recovered from his shock. Well done, Kakashi, clearly you've grown from the lackluster teacher you once were. Your student's youth burns brightly. Well, I can't take all the credit. These three have been working themselves into the ground to get stronger, Kakashi replied, looking down at his student. Naruto's put his all into training and spent his nights studying sealing jutsu and making up for all the rough edges. He left the academy with how'd he grow that much in just a few months? He's not the only one who's been working his ass off, Kiba asked incredulously. Sasuke nodded to Naruto as he rejoined them. Nice work, you actually pulled it off. Was there ever any doubt? Naruto asked. But man, Lee wasn't kidding. I didn't want to show off that much of my arsenal this early. The Uchiha shrugged. Can't be helped. Niji was probably one of the strongest guys here. Geez, you three are going to make the rest of us rookies look bad, Shikamaru commented, patting Naruto on the back. Yeah, kinda gets me fired up for training anyway, Choji said. Hey Naruto, how do you know that girl anyway? Kiba asked, pointing at the green-haired girl. I ran into her back in the forest. I was being attacked by some of the critters and she lent me a hand. She's pretty cool. And we really hit it off, Naruto replied with a shrug. Kiba scoffed. Cool, yeah right. Crazy chick jumped out while everyone was getting dinner just to ask if anyone wanted to hang out. Naruto just chuckled and put his hands behind his head. Yep, sounds like her. Well, that was more evidence that her behavior wasn't just an act. He guessed she's a little odd and she might actually be more hyperactive than Naruto, but she seems alright, Sakura said. Looks like he'd have to look out for both of them. Well, Hopefully they were right about Fu. Still he was surprised Sakura was so quick to consider her a friend. Oh right, Sakura had been alone and ridiculed back in the academy until Ino took her under her wing. She probably saw some of that in the way Fu was blown off by her team. Put that with Naruto vouching for her. Shikamaru looked at her in disbelief. Seriously, more than Naruto? Sheesh. I'm getting a headache just thinking about it. Hey, heads up, looks like the next match is about to be decided, he called out, getting their attention. "Who, come on, pick me," Lee yelled as they all looked up at the board. Well, looks like he wasn't the only one who was eager. No surprise, the older genin did want to prove himself. Shikamaru versus Saku. What, my turn? Oh great, and I've gotta fight someone who's already seen what I can do. Shikamaru groaned. Hey, if Ino was still here she'd be yelling at you to how'd she put it, "Get your ass down there, you lazy bum," Asuma said with a smirk, putting his hand on Shikamaru's shoulder. Choji snickered. He's right, you know, Shikamaru. Yeah, don't remind me, the Nara said as he began to walk down to the arena. This should be interesting. Sasuke hadn't had the chance to see either genin fight. He was curious how his lazy former classmate had made it this far. Naruto grinned as he leaned onto the railing, resting his head on his arms as Shikamaru took his spot across from his opponent. Not who I was hoping for, but I'll kick your ass for what you pulled back in the forest. All the same, Zaku said with a cruel smirk. Shikamaru sighed. And my opponent's hot-blooded too, just perfect. And begin. Zaku immediately raised his arm, pointing his palm at the Nara. I'm going to blow you away. And then Shikamaru vanished in a massive wind blast. Naruto scoffed. Sakura had mentioned that to him. Yeah, letting Orochimaru operate on him just for that was so stupid. With some work he could probably learn to do about the same. This guy had to be lazier than Shikamaru. Speaking of Shikamaru, there was no way he was going down like that. Sure enough, when the attack cleared, Shikamaru was nowhere in sight. Zaku looked around with a confident smirk. Yeah, that's right, run and hide. Zaku jumped backward as a kunai came down from above. He turned his head upward to see Shikamaru looking down on him, but as he raised his arm his attention was drawn back to the kunai and the explosive tag on it. He kicked back to escape as the kunai erupted. When he looked back up, Shikamaru was gone. Then a shadow shot out of the cloud, growing along the ground and speeding towards him like you can catch me with something as simple as that, he yelled as he leaped away. It stopped, it then was pulled back towards the disappearing cloud. They're not too far when his first position stood Shikamaru, his hands in his pockets. Done running? Zaku asked, still smirking arrogantly. He then pointed his palm at the Nara air. Shikamaru chuckled. Yeah, all that dodging was such a pain. Zaku grinned, but then a flash bomb exploded behind Shikamaru, trapping the Oto genin in his shadow. What, no, he shouted as Naruto and many others averted their eyes from the glare. When it cleared, Zaku was now mirroring Shikamaru. Welp, I guess it's about time I finished this, Shikamaru mused. Zaku grit his teeth. Oh yeah, what are you going to do? All this does is force me to imitate you. You can't do anything to me without hurting yourself. And as soon as this jutsu runs out, he never got to finish as Shikamaru suddenly bent backward. He went so far he fell back and had to prop himself up with his hands. Zaku was forced to do the same thing and slammed his head right into the wall. He'd been maneuvered in front of. You really need to pay more attention to your surroundings, Shikamaru said to his now unconscious opponent. Zaku has lost consciousness. The winner is Shikamaru, the proctor declared. Naruto smirked. For all his laziness, his old classmate had a good head on his shoulders. Nice one, Shikamaru. That was pretty cool, the blonde said as Shikamaru rejoined them. The Nara rubbed the back of his neck. Wasn't exactly aiming for cool, it was just the easiest way to take him down with what I had. Come on, pick me, Lee said eagerly, his hands gripping the railing as he stared at the board above. Naruto looked up just in time for the next match to be decided. Shino Aburame versus Garou. Tough break, Shino, Naruto thought as he and many other genin looked to Shino with sympathy. Kiba gritted his teeth and cursed under his breath. The scion of the Aburame clan immediately raised a hand. I forfeit. What, Shino? Kurenai looked at her student in shock. The proctor raised a brow but nodded. Shino has forfeited the match. The winner is Gaara. I'm so sorry, Shino, Anata said beside him. Shino sighed. It is what it is. Nothing at my disposal could circumvent Gaara's sand. I feel like we're missing something here, Kurenai said, looking from one student to another. With a frown, Kiba glared across the chamber at the Sand wielder, yeah, we saw him back in the forest. The guy's bad news, he said with a slight growl. He went out of his way to kill an entire team even after he had their scroll. Shino continued, seeming calmer than his teammate. I see, Karina answered, now frowning at Gaara. She then closed her eyes. If you can't think of a way around his style, then that was the right call. Naruto sighed. He'd have at least tried to fight, but then he felt he could find a way to win. And unlike him, Shino had actually seen what Gaara could do firsthand. He could respect the other Genin's choice. He looked back at the board as names ran across its surface. Sakura Haruno versus Choji Akimichi. Looks like you're up, Sakura, Naruto said back at the pink-haired girl. Guess so, see you in the finals, Sakura replied before she made her way to the stairs. Choji hung his head and groaned. A few months ago I'd have been relieved to see that. Shikamaru clapped him on the shoulder. Hey, relax, just get down there and try your best now, quit moping and head out. You're not going to let yourself get shown up by a girl, are you? He said before shrugging. Not that fighting one's much classier, but my point stands. Choji sighed before making his way towards the stairs. Right about now Ino would probably call him fat to get him fired up, but that's not my style, Shikamaru noted as he watched his old friend join Sakura below. Give it your all, Choji, you got this, Sakura. Naruto shouted. You can do it, take him down, yelled from her place on the other side of the room. Begin, the proctor yelled. Choji immediately formed a hand seal. His torso expanded into a massive round mass before his head and arms pulled in like a turtle's human boulder. The Akimichi barreled towards Sakura, who raised her arm above her head and punched the ground, kicking up a cloud of dirt. Choji plowed through it only to reveal broken tiles and a hole in the exposed earth. Sakura was nowhere in sight. Shikamaru sighed. Yep, I knew that would happen. Well, at least one of us we'll get to the finals. Naruto frowned at the lazy Genin. Shikamaru, what the hell, don't you have any faith in your teammate? Of course I do, Shikamaru replied with a shrug, rubbing the back of his neck, but I also know what he can do. He's got a lot of potential, more than he knows, but right now he's a one-trick pony. He doesn't have any way to deal with an opponent who can avoid that attack, he said as he watched Choji spin around. Sakura then burst from the tiles on the other side of the arena. Choji immediately changed direction and moved after her as she ran through hand seals. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, I see what you mean, and knowing Sakura, he was cut off when the ground gave out below Choji. Once he was just a few feet away from Sakura, he yelled as he fell into a huge hole. Earth-style mud spore. A wave of mud erupted from the ground before her and flooded the hole. As Choji cried out, she stopped, and Naruto guessed Choji was probably buried up to his neck. He could hear him sputtering in the now mud-filled pit. She'll do that, he finished. The pink-haired girl smiled and put her hands on her hips. Choji is unable to battle. The winner is Sakura Haruno. Great job, Sakura, Naruto cheered. Who nice going, Foot cheered from across the arena. Sakura made a hand seal before leaping into the pit. One moment later she came out and pulled Choji out with her covered in mud from the neck down. Sorry about the mess, no hard feelings, right? Yeah, thanks for not leaving me down there, I guess, Choji said as he looked sourly down at the mud covering his body, flicking his arms and sending some onto the tiles. Don't mention it, Sakura replied. Guess I'm the last one, Sasuke mused as he looked to the still blank scoreboard. Well, you know how it is, Naruto said with a shrug. You've gotta start the show off strong, more like saving the best for last, Sasuke replied. Naruto then turned and smiled as Sakura rejoined them. Hey, congratulations, Sakura. Sakura smiled. Thanks, Naruto, she replied as she looked up at the scoreboard. I'm starting to feel like I can really pull my weight. Come on, pick me, I want to show everyone my strength, Lee said eagerly as the board came to life. 10-10 versus Kinley slumped forward in disappointment. 10-10 clapped him on the back. Don't worry, your time will come sooner or later. Now, if you'll excuse me, the brunette said as she started to make her way down to the arena. Good luck, 10-10, Sakura said. Naruto watched as the two kunoichi stood across from each other and stared each other down and begin Hey, called out. Kin immediately reached for her pouch and threw a 3 Senbon. Naruto noticed Sakura suck in a breath beside him as Tenten dodged to the side below. What's wrong? Naruto asked that girl. She uses genjutsu based around bells she attaches to her Senbon. Sakura replied worriedly, gripping the rails. Tenten leaped into the air, drawing a series of shuriken between her fingers. Kin smiled as Naruto grimaced. Tenten had just put herself right where the Oto Kunoichi wanted her. Kin pulled back with her hand, and the tinkling sound of bells ringing echoed through the room. Tenten jolted in midair, her body seizing up. The shuriken fell to the ground before she grabbed at her ears. Kin burst into motion, then running forward and jumping up, she drove her fist into Tenten's solar plexus, knocking the wind out of her before spinning and lashing out with a kick that sent Tenten into the far wall before the pink-clad girl could recover. Kin threw more Senbon her way, riddling her arms with needles before landing in a crouch. Tenten grit her teeth as she stood up, only to jerk as Kin picked something up off the floor. Ninja wire, no doubt, and pulled again, once more filling the room with the sound of bells. She charged forward as Tenten gripped at her ears. Blood ran down from the Konoha Genin's mouth as she bit her lip, the pain shattering the illusion. She reached into her pouch as she blocked a high kick with her forearm. Tenten pulled out a scroll while Kin kicked herself backward. The scroll burst into smoke before a hail of weapons burst out. The Oto Kunoichi's eyes widened as she backflipped and moved farther away, weaving around dozens of kunai and shuriken. All the while, at the same time, another scroll shot into the air, unraveling as it went. More weapons rained down on Kin from above, and this time there were more than just kunai and shuriken. Naruto could pick out katana, tanto, kuzurigama, and spears mixed in as Kin dodged. Tenten shot forward, drawing shuriken and throwing them as she picked a kunai off the ground. Kin ducked under the ninja stars while the weapons coming down from above boxed her in as Tenten raised her blade. Then Kin lifted her hand, and a bell, this one only attached to a wire, was pulled back, its ringing heard by all. Once more Tenten jerked while Kin lashed out, landing a kick square on Tenten's head as Tenten was driven into the ground, pushing the scattered weapons aside. Kin leaped forward. She raised her fist and slammed it into Tenten's head, slamming her head into the ground. Kin stood up while Tenten stayed down. The match is over. Winner Kin Tsuchi. Damn, Sakura grumbled under her breath. Tenten Lee said Guy's side before vanishing, reappearing beside his student. In a burst of speed, he picked her up and carried her back to her team, laying her beside Niji. She fought well, Kakashi noted. Sound-based genjutsu are difficult to deal with. That was probably one of the worst possible matchups for a long-range specialist. Guy hummed in agreement as he stood and sighed. Hopefully they take these lessons to heart. After all, enduring hardships and using them to push yourself farther is not only the beauty of youth. He smiled. It is one of the core attributes of a great shinobi. Sakura raised a brow. Hopefully, Guy grimaced. I'm sure Tenten will learn from her match. Niji, on the other hand, I've tried to turn him away from his unyielding belief in destiny before. Hinata threw a sad look Niji's way. Big brother, huh? Brother Naruto asked, his eyes widened. Cousin Kurenai corrected, looking down at her student. They used to be very close. Naruto frowned, wondering what had happened, but soon his attention was drawn back to the board. Yoroi Akato versus Kankuro. Naruto frowned, not recognizing the first name. He heard footsteps and saw one of Kabuto's similarly garbed teammates making his way down to the arena. Soon enough, he stood across from Kankuro, who was smirking confidently. Whatever expression Yoroi might have had was hidden behind his mask and sunglasses. So I hear this isn't your first time around. Kankuro began conversationally. Far from it, in fact. Too bad you won't even make it to the finals this time. We'll just see about that, won't we? Yoroi replied and begin. Yoroi made a hand sign before throwing a volley of kunai at Kankuro, who leaped to the side. He skidded to a stop as Yoroi charged toward him, taking the bandaged object off of his back and planting it on the ground. Yoroi didn't give him a chance to use whatever it was, closing the distance and throwing a punch at him. The Suna Genin blocked the blow with his forearm. He brushed the attack aside and swept out his arm, only for the purple-clad man to duck under it and lunge at him. Yoroi grasped his arm, leaving him wide open, only to suddenly jump back. He stood a few feet away from Kankuro, Suddenly wary, I see the masked man said that isn't the real you. Is it? Naruto frowned. Huh, what's that mean? Is he a clone? Kankuro smirked. He then dashed forward, launching a series of blows and kicks that Yoroi blocked and weaved around before jumping back to avoid an axe kick. Suddenly Kankuro flew. Literally, he shot forward without kicking off the ground, charging towards Yoroi with his arm reared back. The purple-clad man had no chance to dodge and instead blocked with his forearm, only to let out a pained grunt as blades shot out of Kankuro's arm, slicing through flesh and spilling blood onto the tiles. Yoroi didn't let this affect him, spinning into a kick only for Kankuro to fly above it, flesh splintering away to reveal the wood beneath it. Dove down at Yoroi only for him to drop a smoke bomb. It exploded into a cloud of smog, and in an instant the young man charged out of it. The real USB, he yelled as he charged towards the white object sitting idly on the floor. Sure enough, it unwrapped itself to reveal Kankuro, who leaped backward. The moment he was uncovered, the older genin was faster, however, and closed the distance almost immediately. I've got you now, Yoroi yelled as he grasped at Kankuro, whose eyes went wide. Then he smirked. The instant before Yoroi would have reached him, he burst into smoke to reveal a wooden thing in his place. It was vaguely humanoid with thin arms and equally thin legs hanging out of a brown cloak. It had 3 eyes, one almost hidden between its spike brown hair and jagged teeth. Substitution, Yoroi yelled as the cloud cleared, revealing Kankuro. His hands pointed towards him as his fingers shifted. The newly revealed puppet lunged forward. Yoroi ducked beneath the attack only for it to suddenly fire kunai from beneath its cloak. He dodged to the side, but it sent volley after volley his way, pushing him away from Kankuro. Then it charged at him. Yoroi ready to dodge only to suddenly grunt and stumble. This is poison. Took it long enough to kick in, Kankuro said with a grin. Weakened and off balance, he was powerless as the puppet reached him and wrapped its arms around him. He struggled weakly as its grip tightened, its arms constricting until he cried out, "That's enough." Yoroi is unable to battle. The winner is Kankuro. Ah, well, if you say so. Kankuro conceded before his puppet let his opponent go. A puppet? Huh, never heard of that before, Naruto muttered as he frowned at the Suna genin. That's because it's a discipline exclusive to Suna. Kakashi informed him and the others. They use strings of chakra to manipulate their puppets, and they're always chock full of all sorts of dangerous weapons and often poison, as Kankuro demonstrated. Naruto hummed as the electronic board came to life once again. "Come on," Lee said eagerly, gripping the railing tightly as he looked up at the board. Fu versus Dosu Kinyuta. "Alright, my turn," Fu cheered before she leaped over the railing and ran over to take her spot. Dosu soon followed suit. Soon after, walking over to take his place across from Fu, Naruto gripped the railing as he frowned. Maybe he should have warned her about him too. From what Sakura said, his sound attacks were hard to deal with. He raised his fist. "Get him." Fu gave him a confident smile before turning to Dosu. "Don't hold back, okay?" she said as she slipped into a fighting stance, bending slightly at the knees with one foot swept back with her right arm was held in front of her. "Oh, don't worry about that," Dosu replied as he raised his gauntlet hand and began. Fu vanished, disappeared in a burst of speed, and reappeared in the air at Dosu's left side. She swept her arm out at him only for him to duck underneath. The mint-haired kunoichi twisted her body, planting one hand on the ground, and reversed course, lashing out with a kick. Dosu raised his forearm to block and began to lash out with his gauntlet only for Fu to somersault back onto her feet and kick backward. She crossed half of the arena in a moment before blurring into motion again, jumping from one spot to another. Whoa, Naruto's eyes darted from place to place. She's faster than Bushy Brow, and it looked like he didn't need to warn her that the gauntlet was dangerous. Fu continued to jump around the arena, attacking Dosu on his left side at every opportunity before darting away. "Is running away all you can do?" Dosu asked. "I don't know what the deal with that gauntlet is, but there's no way you just show it off like that for no reason," Fu replied as she jumped back. "Well, give the girl a prize," Dosu responded before frowning as she vanished again. His eyes immediately shot up to where Fu stood on the ceiling above him. Fu came down in a blur. Takigakure Hurricane Dosu jumped back as she crashed into the arena amid small whirlwind and shattering tiles. The bandaged boy's eyes widened as a large section of the floor came flying at him, blowing away the dust cloud to reveal it had been kicked by Fu. It slammed into him and drove him into the far wall. With a cry of pain, Fu followed after him, closing the distance in a moment and ready to continue her attack. Then Dosu banged his gauntlet against the wall and shock filled Fu's face before it twisted in pain as she grasped at her ears. Naruto gripped the railing again, as did Sakura beside him. Oh no, he heard her say, "Pretty good, you're quick on your feet, but you can't outrun the speed of sound," Dosu said, one hand on his chest. As he stepped forward, the vibrations, my gauntlet become sound waves. I can use them to attack my opponent's inner ear, and once that's damaged you lose your equilibrium. I don't even need to hit you. One swipe of my gauntlet and I've all but won. With that he ran forward, raising his gauntlet with one eye screwed shut. Fu kicked herself back, not nearly as fast as she had been, and made a single hand sign. She inhaled and sparkling silver powder poured from her mouth, filling the air and shining so bright. Naruto winced and averted his eyes. It probably worked like a flash bomb on Dosu and stunned him as he didn't follow her immediately. Fu drew a kunai with an explosive tag and threw it into the cloud. The sound of steel crashing into stone told everyone it missed, and then Dosu charged out of the cloud ready to continue his attack, and then the cloud exploded. The whole thing became a massive fireball. The blast sent Dosu flying forward, the fire licking at his back. Fu jumped at him and twisted her body, using the momentum to slam her foot into his head. They both fell to the ground in different directions, landing ungracefully and sliding across the floor until they stopped, but only Fu was still moving. It was hard, that much was obvious, but with her right hand on her ear and one eye still shut, Fu shakily climbed to her feet. She was unsteady, but standing. "Thanks for the lesson, thought I'd return the favor," Fu said with a smile. "That's called a dust explosion." Dosu has lost consciousness. Winner. Fu pumped her fist in the air only to nearly lose what balance she had and stumble. "Great job, way to go, Fu," Naruto cheered, getting another smile and a thumbs up from the tan kunoichi before she started to make her way back to her team. Stumbling along the way, her Jonin sensei soon came to help, but Naruto couldn't help but frown as his gaze followed her back to her team, who didn't seem to pay much attention to her. Good thing she didn't let Dosu get another move in. If he'd managed to hit her with another sound attack, she'd have been done for. Sakura said her teammates don't seem too thrilled. Naruto said, "Didn't you say she mentioned that they were thrown together for the exam?" Sakura asked, and Naruto nodded. "Well, I guess that kinda explains it. They probably barely know each other, though they're all from Taki, so you'd think they'd show some concern." "Tell me about it," he grumbled before turning back to the board as it lit up again. "All right, Lee, believe, and your chance will finally come," Guy encouraged, raising one fist in the air. "I don't care anymore," Lee replied. Guy's arm dropped as he raised a brow. "I'm sick of getting my hopes up. I don't care even if I go last," he replied, and turned his back to the board. "Is he sulking or something?" Naruto wondered aloud. "Sasuke Uchiha versus Masumi Tsurugi. Looks like I'm up," Sasuke said with a smirk as he stepped away from the wall, his hands in his pockets. Ali slumped forward. Naruto frowned at him. "What's wrong? I thought you didn't care." "I thought that if I said that my fortune would turn around," Lee replied, "and he was definitely sulking now, like maybe I was jinxing myself." Guy rubbed the back of his head. "Lee, I don't think it works like that." He then crossed his arms. "That sort of thing includes one's thoughts, so oh, I see now. So no matter what I said, it wouldn't cover my true desire. I don't think that's the problem here," Naruto thought before turning to his teammate. "Good luck, Sasuke. Sakura and I are waiting in the winner's circle for you." "Well, you won't have to wait much longer," the Uchiha replied as he made his way down. It wasn't long before he stood across from his opponent, Kabuto's remaining teammate. Like Yoroi, the man wore a mask and had coal eyes behind a pair of glasses. No banter, just like Naruto expected of Sasuke, as the Uchiha stared down his opponent on the arena floor below. "Get him, Sasuke!" Foot cheered him on and began. Masumi charged at Sasuke as crimson bled into the Uchiha's eyes. The purple-clad man threw a punch at Sasuke. His teammates started to block, but then Naruto saw his eyes widen. Sasuke ducked down at the last moment, letting the attack sail over his head before aiming a kick at the older Genin's jaw. The purple-clad man tilted his head back, the blow missing him by inches. Sasuke threw himself away from his opponent, flipping through the air to land on his feet. Before kicking back, he ran through hand seals as his opponent closed the distance. The Uchiha inhaled and breathed out a stream of fireballs. Masumi ducked and weaved through them before leaping to the side to avoid one aimed right at him. What Masumi's eyes widened. What he'd noticed became apparent a moment later when Sasuke pulled his hands back. The fireballs still in the air broke apart as shuriken hidden within them cut their way out, attached to wires held in Sasuke's hands. Masumi was wrapped up in the wires as the shuriken planted themselves in the ground, held immobile in the air. Winner Sasuke the proctor declared. "Whoa, nice work Sasuke." Foot cheered. "Well, that was quick," Naruto noted as he watched his teammate loosen his grip, allowing the wires to fall harmlessly to the ground. He then made his way back to their spot while Masumi glared at his feet as Sasuke rejoined them. Sakura smiled. "That was amazing Sasuke." Naruto grinned. "That didn't take long, trying to show off by having the shortest match." "Hardly." Sasuke set his hands in his pockets, then he closed his eyes and quietly added, "I almost lost that fight, Naruto." And Sakura blinked. "Huh, the blonde voice, that guy did something weird with his body. He could somehow loosen his bones and slither like a snake. If I'd blocked that first strike, he would have coiled his arm around mine and then wrapped me up completely. It would have been over if I hadn't seen it coming with my Sharingan." He opened his eyes and looked at the purple-clad man, who frowned at the ground as he returned to his place. "I came up with that plan on the fly when I realized close-range combat wasn't an option." "Huh, that's freaky," Naruto commented, raising a brow at the guy. It wasn't his style, but he could see how useful something like that would be. The board came back to life, running through just 3 names. "Come on, pick me," Lee cried as he looked up at the board, one fist raised to his chest, trembling as he bore holes into it with his eyes. Finally, the last match was decided. Kaido versus Hinata. "Hyuga, it didn't choose me. I passed without a match," Lee said, dejected as his arms fell limply at his sides. His unbelieving eyes continued to stare up at the board. "Hey, look on the bright side," Naruto said, putting a hand on the green-clad boy's shoulder. "You'll get to show your stuff in front of a crowd, and you're the only one here no one's seen in action." Guy nodded, crossing his arms. "He's right, Lee. I know this is a disappointment, but this is an advantage. It puts you in a better position than all your rivals, and you'll still have the chance to prove you're a splendid ninja." Guy then gave his student a thumbs up and a sparkling smile. "You'll show everyone that hard work is just as good as raw talent in the finals." That seemed to raise Lee's spirit as the thick-browed boy raised a fist in the air. "Yes, Guy-sensei." Kiba turned to his teammate, smiling and raising a fist. "Good luck, Hinata. Kick his ass for me. Do your best, Hinata. Show everyone how much you've grown." Kurenai told her, her eyes briefly glancing at Naruto for a moment. Hinata steeled herself and nodded. Before making her way down to the arena, she soon took her place across from the remaining Taki ninja, who smirked. "This should be a cinch. I've already seen what you can do thanks to that cousin of yours," he said confidently. Hinata didn't say anything back. The pale-eyed girl just frowned and slipped into the same combat stance as her cousin, the veins around her eyes bulging as her dojutsu activated. "Give it all you've got, Kaido!" yelled from above, and begin. "Hey!" yelled Kaido, immediately leaped backward as Hinata moved to close the distance between them. The Taki Genin ran through hand signs as Hinata approached. "Earth style," he called out before Hinata reached him, threw a palm strike his way only for him to block with his forearm. Naruto remembered the pain that shot through his arm when Neji managed. Looked like Hinata was off to a strong start. Emphasis on looked like, because then Kaido burst into smoke and was replaced by a log. He reappeared behind Hinata, his hands running through seals again. "Earth style, stone daggers." He placed his hands on the ground before chunks of rock burst from the ground, their sharpened points facing Hinata. The Hyuga heiress drew a kunai and deflected the chunks of stone, but then a brief look of shock passed over her face. She threw herself to the side just in time to avoid a series of daggers with explosive tags. Hinata shielded her face as the tags exploded beside her just outside of the blast range. She then leaped back as a pair of snakes made of mud crawled out of the cloud and tried to wrap around her feet. She drew a second kunai and threw them both, impaling the serpents and causing them to break apart into brown puddles on the floor. Before she moved to close the distance, narrowing her eyes, she suddenly shot forward in a burst of speed and jumped as the ground opened up beneath her feet. Kaido's eyes widened as he jumped back, trying to avoid close-range combat, but Hinata had come too far. He gritted his teeth as he drew a kunai and stabbed at her, wincing in pain as she sidestepped his attack and pressed one palm to his elbow, the other moving to his chest as he kept kicking himself back, trying his best to weave around her attacks while she bent her body or ducked to avoid swipes of his kunai. He reached into his pouch and threw a flash bomb behind him. Hinata looked in shock at the small sphere while Kaido ducked down. Naruto saw her shield her eyes just in time as the bomb went off, causing all to avert their eyes from the blinding light. He heard a cry of pain when the light cleared. Hinata and Kaido were standing inches apart, the Taki ninja's kunai held out, having just barely missed her while her hand had struck his chest. The brown-haired boy coughed up blood, and then Hinata went to finish the fight and delivered several palm strikes to his torso. One final strike sent him to the floor, where he feebly tried to stand, his movements so slow that it was clear who won the match. The match is over. Hinata wins. Whoa, I made a good call trying to keep Niji at a distance. Speaking of whom, Naruto heard a slight groan and turned to see that Niji had woke up at some point. He doubted he'd just now regained consciousness. He'd probably been stewing in his loss and hadn't said anything. The older boy seemed to have a real stick up his ass, so it wouldn't surprise him, but right now he was glaring down at Hinata, who looked back at them all and smiled, though she looked away and to the ground when his own gaze turned back to her. Naruto grinned in anticipation. So guess it's about time we talk about the main event. And with that, Hey declared, with this the preliminary trials have been concluded. All those continuing to the third exam come down to the floor.